All right, good morning, everyone. I'd like to welcome you all to the Committee of the Whole meeting. First, I want to recognize that CVRD is on the unceded territories of the Quetzin, Malahat, Subaxat, Halalt, Penelakut, Semanis, Laxon, Pakachin, Didadat, and Pacheedaht nations, whose people have walked gently here for thousands of years. And with the quorum being present, I'd like to call this meeting to order. Our first item of business is approval of the minutes. We have before us the minutes from the Committee of the Whole. Approval of the agenda is the first item of business here. We have before us an agenda. Would someone like to move that we adopt the agenda as presented? Director Abbott, is there a seconder? Director Justice, any discussion? All in favor? And opposed? None opposed, motion carries. Now we will move on to the minutes. So we have before us the minutes from the Committee of the Whole meeting of March 26, 2025. Would someone like to move that these be adopted? Moved by Director Martman. Second by Director Kallio. Any discussion? I'll call the question. All in favor? And opposed? None opposed, motion carries. Before we move on to public input, I just want to take a moment to acknowledge alternate Director Lochner, who's going to be joining us today in Director Nicholson's place. Welcome. All right, we'll now move on to public input period. This is a period to offer the public an opportunity to comment on an agenda item before the committee considers the item. The public input period procedure policy allows for an allotment of 15 minutes, where the speaker is welcome to comment on any items on the agenda up to a maximum of 3 minutes. This excludes items that are or have been the subject of a public hearing. Input from the committee is valued and appreciated. We request that input is presented in a friendly and respectful manner. Your cooperation in maintaining a safe, respectful, and orderly environment is greatly appreciated. So I'll now turn to the gallery and ask if anyone would like to step forward for public input. You can start by stating your name and address.
There we go. Okay, good morning, Murray McNabb, 4659 Yellow Point Road, Area H, CVRD. I just wanted to speak briefly about the regional growth strategy. I'm concerned about the municipalities having too much input in this growth strategy. I see the new mayor of Ladysmith is here, and welcome. And I think that she will be dealing with far more common sense than the last two mayors of Ladysmith, including Mayor Steppingstone that used to sit at the very front there. I've seen.
Sir, would we just show a bit more respect for former Mayor Stone?
Sorry, Mayor Stone.
Okay, thank you.
Who's moved on to some higher order. The town of Ladysmith in the past, in regards to Area G on the south of Ladysmith, when someone comes to a municipality and says, please take us, the municipalities usually just do a land grab and take the people because they get more taxes. Even though the municipalities claim if the developer puts in all the services, they still lose money. That was bad enough that one house disappeared and 24 new ones appeared. On the north side in Area H, some years ago, it might even be 20 years ago, there was a little mobile home park there called Ivy Green Mobile Home Park. People lived there for $200 a month with ocean view. The good old Oak Bay Marine Group bought the property, came to Ladysmith and said, can we join the town, because then they could get sewer services. Of course, the town in a great flurry gobbled them up and said, come in. So the people, everybody at the mobile home park residents all got the boot. 3 contractors from Ladysmith, kind of opportunistic, built a new mobile home park, and the people had to move there. The rents were quite a bit more, and of course many of the people had older mobile homes and they couldn't be relocated. That land then sat vacant for years, I'll say maybe 10 or 12 years. Then the Oak Bay Marine Group sold it to someone else, and now it's a new subdivision. So I'm afraid that the town of Ladysmith is going to keep creeping north, and the only thing that's going to stop it is going to be the native reserve at IR number 12. A previous mayor and council from Ladysmith floated an idea of taking in a whole bunch of land from Couverton, the land development part of Timber West. Fortunately, the residents of the town of Ladysmith and APP shut that down. I'm also concerned in our area with the development in the Nanaimo Regional District. As you might know, it sits over top of the Cassidy Aquifer.
Mr. McNabb, we're over time now.
Okay, I'll just carry on.
Thank you.
Have a good day. Thank you.
You too. Thank you for your input. I don't see any other members of the public in the gallery, so we'll now move on to reports. We have before us a report from the Facilities and Transit Division regarding the transit fare change implementation date. Mr. Wakeham, were you going to introduce us, or is the expectation that we're going to move straight to the motion?
You can go straight to the motion if that's fine by the committee.
All right, any questions from the committee for Mr. Wakeham, or does someone want to move that we get this motion on the floor for the recommendation? You see no questions, would someone like to move the recommendation? Moved by Director McGonigal, seconded by Director Ostache. Any discussion? Yeah, Director Acton.
You've been wrecked.
Yeah, you're good now.
Mr. Wakeham, can you just give us like a brief update on like how Handy Dart is just doing in general? I know like over the past few years, there's been like lots of challenges accommodating people's service, and we changed, I don't remember when it was, but we changed providers. And so like overall, what can you say about it that we can share with the community?
Well, Mr. Chair, through the Director Acton, I didn't plan for that question.
Okay.
It was not directly related to fare changes, but I mean, I think I think Transdev is doing quite well. And again, a number of years ago, we only had about 25 to 3,000 hours. We are up to 10,000 hours for custom service. We've almost quadrupled the amount of service provided to the community. And again, it's very awkward to talk about this during the transit suspension of the service with the strike going on. But,
Right.
my understanding is, I mean, there was some of the previous employees that worked for the private contractor moved across to Transdev, and they directly understand and know the clients that Handy Dart services. So there's been no negatives that I've heard from that side of things, but I think it's operating well. I know that we can always use more hours for custom service, which has been approved, and we are just waiting for an implementation of this once the strike is over as well for custom service.
Thank you.
All right, any questions regarding the transit fare change implementation date? So call the question, all in favor? And opposed, none opposed, motion carries. We'll now move on to the next report from the Facilities and Transit Division regarding the BC Low Carbon Fuel Standard Credit Aggregation, Sale, and Allocation. Any questions for staff, or do we want to move straight to the recommendation? Director Abbott?
Thank you, Chair. I support in practice the recommendation, but I'm wondering whether it might make more sense to allow the funds to accumulate in a reserve fund rather than send them back to the various service areas or where the charging stations are. The funds aren't that great an amount, so allowing each facility to enjoy a nominal amount of revenue back seems inconsequential, while at the same time we could use more reserve funds to allow for future infrastructure purchases.
Thank you, Director Abbott. Mr. Wakeham, Ms. Rondo, any comment on that?
Mr. Chair, I'm just going to turn it over to Ms. Rondo. She was the writer of this report, has the most knowledge on this. I'll let her answer the question.
Thank you. Yeah. If that's the direction of the board, staff can definitely work with the finance division to set up a reserve fund. It would be recommended that the reserve fund be established within each function and perhaps not a general pot of funds. But that can be at the direction of the board.
Okay, thank you. So I'll turn to the committee. Do we want to consider the recommendation or direct staff to create some sort of reserve fund for these credits? Director Abbott.
Again, given the nominal amount that we're talking about, I think less paperwork, one reserve fund would be what I'd be recommending.
Any further discussion on this? Do you want to get a motion on the floor, Director Abbott?
I guess continuing with the recommended resolution, part one, but that the second part, the revenue earned through the sales of credits be allocated to a newly created reserve fund for future EV infrastructure procurement.
All right, so that's the motion. Is there a seconder? Director Wilson? So it's second, it's now on the floor. Any further discussion? Okay, I've got Director Morrison. Oh, Director Morrison, can I go to staff first? Okay, Mr. Wakeham, then I'm going to go to Director Morrison.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a thought here with regard to that. If you put the funds in one pot of in one function where there's one central pot of funds, it might be challenging as to how we potentially draw on that. Currently, each charging station at each location, I'll say the rec centers in Ingram Street, those functions pay for those. So I'll use Kerry Park as an example. They paid for the capital cost to put it in. They also pay for the operating cost, which at best is breaking even. So again, that's why staff would recommend that it does go back to the existing entities that are paying for those, as well as if they are to be capitalized. The committee and the board also approved previously that that with regard to replacement of those individual stations, that it would be looked at through the individual functions budgets, and if they had appropriate funds to do so on that. So I'm just thinking that Mr. Abbott's idea of putting it into one central pot of funds could be challenging for finance as to how they would be allocated out.
Great, thanks for that. Director Morrison?
Thank you, Chair. And, in considering this report and the future of charging infrastructure at public facilities, I'm sort of challenged because we haven't had the discussion about, should we? Because the initial precept of putting the charging infrastructure at facilities was to kickstart the ability of people to be able to charge their electric vehicles when they were out and about in communities. And it was fully expected that there would be a public or a private investment through service stations and the like, and also the home charging stations. So there were good comments in the report about the need as to whether or not we should even be in the business of providing a charging infrastructure at our facilities. So I'm thinking that the idea of a pot and savings for replacement or new investment might be premature if we haven't even had the discussion as to whether we want to be in the business or not.
Director McGonigal?
Thank you, Chair. And my question was, as the implementation of regional recreation has been established, whether or not that would be the avenue for the revenue to reside, considering most of them do reside within recreation facilities, aside from the Ingram Street, which would reside in Function 100. Looking at future placement, I know most capital costs will be borne within the recreation facilities themselves. But for the infrastructure of charging stations, why could that not be implemented within the regional recreation function?
Director Beeston?
My question is, when these were installed, were the locations where they're installed given the indication that they would be getting this revenue? And have they been planning on, as little as it might be, have they been planning on being able to use that to offset things?
Mr. Wakeham, Ms. Rondo, one of you be able to answer that? Ms. Rondo?
Yeah, thank you. The stations were initially at the public facilities, so the 4 stations. They were initially installed in 2012, 2013, and they were installed through grants, as Director Morrison stated, to kind of kickstart or initiate, be an early adopter of EV charging and putting infrastructure in the rural areas, particularly, for example, we have Gouchen Lake Shawnigan Lake area, and then Kerry Park. We did have to replace them in 2019, and that cost was borne directly from the respective facilities. And this regulation that enables the EV charging stations to generate credits has only been in place since 2022. So it kind of came up for us as something that we're not, used to, or we were new to at the time. And so this is the first time that we're venturing into what to do with the credits. They've been accumulating since 2022, and so far we've earned, including 2024's number, 83. So it's very new, and I would suggest that no, it wasn't initially contemplated when they were initially installed.
Thanks for that. I'm going to turn now to, I've got seat 27. Assuming, Mr. Elzinga.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through to Director McGonigal's question around regional recreation. So the Function 390 budget really is divided by the 9 facilities. Each facility maintains its current budget. And so the Function 390 only has 2 exceptions to that. One is putting a reserve fund for facility use analysis for all 9 facilities to the benefit of all 9, as well as administration for commissions, and because the commissions handle all 9 facilities. I'm not aware that all 9 facilities have charging infrastructure, so at this point, I would recommend that it's back to individual budgets.
I'm going to now turn to Director Stash, and then Director Abbott.
Just speaking to the change in the motion, listening to staff's comments, and then the fact that we have increased the fees, and there's already or the charging fees now from being free to the $1, now $2. That revenue and expense accounting and finance is already there, so I'd be supportive of the original staff recommendation. I just wanted to make note that being how we're already generating a revenue for each of those, that the credits should apply to where within the existing revenue model, so I won't be supporting the change to the motion.
Director Abbott to close.
Thank you. I just wanted to defer to staff's recommendation that if this should pass with an accumulation of a reserve fund, that it would be for the individual functions or placements where they are. But I don't know if I can make that change, or in light of a desire not to craft motions on the fly, as we've talked about before, perhaps this could be referred back to staff for, unless there's a degree of urgency to get this dealt with.
I'm going to turn to the corporate officer.
We can have the chair actually separate the first and second motion to take care of the first motion. Then we can deal with the second portion of that. And if it's the desire of the board to refer back to staff or make an amendment to that motion, happy to do so. Yeah.
Okay, let's consider the first part then. So the first part of the recommendation is that staff, or of the motion, sorry, is that staff pursue an agreement with the Community Energy Association for low carbon fuel standard credit aggregation and sales. Okay, so it's already on the floor. I'm going to call the question. All in favor? And opposed? Not opposed. Motion carries. We'll now consider the second part of the motion. So this will read almost identical to what's in your agenda, except, no, I'm actually, if you read it out.
Apologies if I have missed a word or two, but I have it as that revenue earned through the sales of credits be allocated to the newly created reserve fund for the future of CVRD facilities where the charging stations are located. Is that?
Director Abbott to speak to that.
I wondered if there was any appetite for referring that portion back to staff.
Well, you want to test it out and move that?
I move that the revenue earned through the sale and credits be allocated to the respective CVRD facilities as a reserve fund be considered by staff for a future report back to this committee.
So we're now on the referral. Yeah, so Director Abbott's moved the referral. Is there a seconder? Seconded by Director McClinton. Director Estache?
Mr. Whiteham's had his hand up for a while, Chair.
Okay, I'm going to go to staff first. I'm going to go to you, Director of Stash. Mr. Wakeham, then Director of Stash.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm just wondering if it'd be appropriate if Ms. Bohan, our finance manager, could comment on this about setting up individual reserves specifically for charge stations at the rec centers. I think that could be done under capital reserves have a specific allocation in mind, so that's probably possible. But if she, I believe she's on the call, if she could comment on that, if that makes sense, as opposed to just having it go back to the respective facilities and they can choose to either put it into their operating reserve if they wish, or capital reserve, or use it the current year. But I think it'd be appropriate to have Ms. Bowen comment.
Ms. Bowen?
Can everybody hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you. Yeah.
Okay. Setting them up separately from the reserves, operating reserves that we already have now is a more of an accounting background than stuff that we'd have to set up here. It wouldn't be really a capital reserve, as it's not really capital nature as to what the product is that we would be putting it towards. So it would be a little bit more work on finances to keep that separate from an ordinary operating reserve, and we're currently set up to in the process of bylaws to have operating reserve.
Ms. Bowen, we're having a bit of trouble hearing you with the sound quality.
Sorry, I'm having issues with my computer.
Yeah, that's better.
Downstairs. Sorry, we're in the middle of year end. So in the finance division, with regards to operating reserves, we already have specific ones set up for each entire function. Now, if you're wanting it separate from that, that's a little bit more accounting work to be done, tracking and keeping tallies on everything when information is being used. And we could do that, but we also do not have each individual operating reserve set up with its own bylaw, like a capital reserve, and capital reserves are usually set to buy capital. This is not capital in nature, so we wouldn't be having them in the capital reserve. So it would just be a little bit more work on finance to just kind of track it and keep track of it. And then it's like Mr. Wakeham said about expenses, who pays for it, different areas. Now you're putting it into regional. Well, maybe the expenses were coming out of an area that was strictly like electoral areas. So those are things we have to keep in mind as well. But we can look and see on being able to set it up for you.
Great, thank you. I'm going to now turn to Director of Stash.
Thank you, Chair. I was going to ask for clarity on the director's motion, if it was exclusively to totally disregard the original staff recommendation, or if it was to explore the pros and cons of both equally, because we've heard from two staff now saying that it's a con rather than a pro, changing the, going to the direction of the intention of the revised motion. So I was leaning towards supporting the motion now because it's only a report, but hearing two staff now with their concerns, I'm going to stick with my original not supporting it.
All right, I'll now turn to Director Segal.
Yeah, that about sums it up. I'm not going to support the referral motion.
All right, Director Abbott to close.
Given what I've heard from staff, the last thing I want to do is add more expense. The intent was to create an incentive for future installations. Nothing from what staff have expanded upon warrants spending any more funds on this. So I don't know whether we just vote. I won't be supporting my own motion. So.
All right. Okay, so we're going to vote now on the motion to refer this to staff for a report. So all those who support the referral, raise your hand. I'll call the question. All in favor? And opposed? Motion's defeated with the entire committee opposed. So now we'll go back to the original motion, and our corporate officer suggested we can amend the original motion to remove the reference to the reserve fund and to revert it back to the original wording from staff. So someone like to move that? Moved by Director Segal, second by Director Abbott. All in favor? And opposed? Not opposed, motion carries. So we've now amended it back to its original wording, and I'll call the question on it then. All in favor? And opposed? Unopposed, motion carries. Okay, we can now move on to item R3.
We have 5 minutes. Oh, only a minute, half an hour. I'll just go with my
Okay, all right. I think there's going to be, I'm assuming staff will be introducing this, so I think Director Acton, you'll be fine to step out for a minute. So I will turn to staff and ask if you'd like to provide a bit of an introduction to this item, and then I'd like to offer a few comments myself to help guide us through. I'm anticipating there's going to be a bit of a lengthy discussion.
Good morning. Thank you, Chair and committee members. So staff last reported to committee on October the 9th. And the recommendation that was passed by the board subsequently was that the staff report on the topic of the RGS be referred to the municipalities and EASC directors, and that the municipalities be asked to appoint a representative to the RGS steering committee, consider potential additional matters in the development of a regional growth strategy. And those included potential municipal incorporation and boundary changes to accommodate future growth and servicing objectives, the future of the Island Rail Corridor, and cooperation with the Regional District of Nanaimo on future growth around the Nanaimo Airport and Cassidy Aquifer. And so the letter was sent out from the board, and we did receive responses from all of the municipalities. All of the municipal councils appointed representatives to the steering committee, and that steering committee has since met to discuss the matters that were referred to the municipalities and the content of the report that is before you today. So I just wanted to give you a bit of that background and let you know that it's been a very collaborative process to get to where we are today on the staff side. So the recommendation from staff is a 4-part recommendation, and I would encourage you to deal with it in 4 separate parts. The first being that the CVRD initiate the preparation of a regional growth strategy applicable to all lands within the jurisdictional boundaries of the Cowichan Valley Regional District. And I use the word jurisdictional because it will not apply to First Nations reserves or lands within the Islands Trust area. Second, that the CVRD board proposes to deal with the following additional matters during the preparation of a regional growth strategy. And the one that has been included there is cooperation with the Regional District of Nanaimo on future growth of lands in the vicinity of the Nanaimo Airport and Cassidy Aquifer. And so the reason that is the only matter that is recommended for your consideration is that is the one matter that all of the steering committee members agreed should be put forward. With regard to the other 2 matters, the Island Rail Corridor issue has subsequently been dealt with somewhat by the board. The Island Rail Corridor Foundation has been provided with funding to work on reversion, as the owners of the corridor, to work on the reversion and interest of with local First Nations, and so it was felt that that is in part been dealt with. I would say that notwithstanding, through a regional growth strategy, there could be discussions around, certainly could be discussions around that, but that doesn't necessarily need to be highlighted as an additional matter. And then the last one, which I suspect will be one that will be fairly debatable, controversial, perhaps for this group, will be discussion around municipal incorporation and boundary changes. And I understand that that's a fairly sensitive topic within the region and in communities. And at the same time, there are some interesting discussions that could be had around that particular topic. The steering committee weren't able to reach consensus that should be put forward, and as I said, that's why it's not included here. So the other 2 items are notification to the Minister of Housing and Municipal Affairs and affected local governments, and that a steering committee and intergovernmental advisory committee be established with the terms of reference that are included as an attachment A, and these were the same terms of reference that came before the committee previously. The other document that's attached to the report is a draft terms of reference for the regional growth strategy itself, and should the decision be made by the board to initiate the regional growth strategy. The steering committee would convene and go through the steps of trying to refine that draft terms of reference, and that will be brought back to this committee for endorsement or for any changes that need to have happen prior to any kind of proposals or requests for proposals being issued. So there were just a couple of points. There might have been, I know there were some date timing errors that were sort of identified in that draft. So just bear in mind that is a draft. It can be updated. And the other kind of key point I wanted to note is that the Environment Division, as it's now within the Land Use Services Department, I'm sort of more attuned to their work program. And one of the interesting projects that's on their books for this year is the Regional Conservation Strategy. So we see an opportunity to issue an RFP to undertake the Regional Conservation Strategy, which is great timing to align with and provide information to inform a regional growth strategy. So that's key. And then lastly, I would say that really the intent of a regional growth strategy is to look at the work that's been done individually by the CVRD electoral areas and the municipalities and to try to find alignment. So trying to find alignment at a regional level around how to make decisions on transportation, how to make decisions on settlement patterns and population growth. And so really taking a higher level look at how that is occurring. So I'm here to answer any questions that you may have, and I'll leave it with you.
Okay, thanks for that. Any questions at this stage, or do we want to move straight into discussion? Before we move on, I just wanted to provide a few comments just to try to guide us through it, which I'm anticipating is going to be a fairly lengthy and contentious discussion. So, yeah.
More comments first. Sorry, I didn't know if there was no question.
Yeah, well, how about we do questions, then I can maybe just set some context for our discussion. So let's limit it to questions now, and then once we get through questions, we'll move on to debate. What's that? Okay, I've got Director Morrison and then Director McClinton. Again, I'm asking if we can stick to questions for now and then move into debate after that.
Thank you, Chair. You made, Ms. Trolf, you made reference to the referrals to the participating municipalities and to Electoral Area Services Committee. And I'm drawing a blank on when it came and what the outcome of that discussion with EASC. I'm sensing that there would have been recommendations come from that committee following a discussion. So have I just missed something? Has that referral and engagement happened at Electoral Area Services, to your knowledge?
Yeah, it happened.
Ms. Gurdjieff?
Through you, Chair, Director Morrison, yes, I believe a report did go to Electoral Area Services Committee. I don't recall any specific resolutions coming out of that unless Chair Segal does.
We were asleep at the wheel.
Sure, so I'm just going to move the queue around a bit. Just
Sure.
Chair Skull, you want to
Just
weigh in
to
on that really
note,
quick?
I went on a bit of a deep dive on this last night. So November 20th, it came to EASC, and I couldn't find the video, but the minutes reflected we just received it for information and didn't make any motions from it.
A follow-up, Director Morrison?
We just like gapped.
Okay, I'm going to now turn to Director McClinton. Again, we're focused right now more on questions before moving into debate. Sorry, can you press the button again? Okay, now go for it.
Thank you, Chair, and I didn't mean to cut you off. I'm looking forward to your comments. At the Electoral Area Service Committee, I had lots of questions for you at that time. It was for information. There was two things that I think they were staff sort of nodded, and it was to take away, to come back, pitfalls of other regional districts that have gone through regional growth strategy. I had asked for some information around that, and then the options for electoral areas opting out, like what is the precedent for those? Do we, I looked through the information. Do we have any information on either of those two things?
Through you, Chair. So the pitfalls is a difficult question to respond to, and I mean, I'm there are certainly some sort of horrible examples of regional growth strategy issues which have arisen particularly in within the capital region. And ultimately, I think the important thing to note is that the development of a regional growth strategy should be it's intended to be a partnership between the CVRD, electoral areas, and municipalities, and then done in collaboration, and it should be meeting the needs of all of the partners at the table. And so, you know, the goal would be to create a strategy that isn't going to be confrontational or adversarial and isn't going to set the board up for a situation where that could happen. And there are examples in the province of very sort of aspirational or high-level regional growth strategies, which have, I would say, you know, very few teeth, but, you know, provide some good direction. And then there are some that are very, very restrictive. And I suspect that perhaps the regional growth strategy for the CVRD would be somewhere in the middle, and it's really hard. So it's really hard to know at this point. In terms of the question around opting out, this one has come up before. The process of adopting a regional growth strategy involves making requests to the board and to the affected local governments to accept the RGS. So it's a decision of the board and the municipal councils. There's no sort of electoral area vote. It's not like the Bill 35 principal residence requirement where, you know, an electoral area can kind of decide to opt out. It's not like that. It's a decision of the board. Yeah.
Sorry, I should have just left it on. Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I mean, I remember the meeting fairly well, and maybe I have some of it wrong, but you know, I just looked to our neighbors to the north in Nanaimo, who's one of the first to adopt the regional growth strategy, and you know, I think there's a lot to be learned from those regional districts that went in with great intentions, and 20 years later, they're struggling with decisions they're making. And I would have hoped just to see, you know, that was something that I asked for. I know we didn't make a motion because it was for information only at that time. So I was hoping to see something today. So I'll leave it at that.
Director Martman, and then Director Segal.
So there is a document that's out there. It's called the Regional Growth Strategies, an Explanatory Guide. And in that, it talks about opting out. And I can just quote it, I think. Maybe I can't. Pros, cons, and in between. There it is.
So Director Martman, is this a question for staff?
Yes, it is,
Okay.
because staff have said that it's a board decision. And I just wanted to understand this part of the document with your understanding and see how this fits into it. It said, and I'll just, it does quote the section of the, I think it's the LGA, but a municipal council or electoral area director could advocate to the regional district that its area be excluded from the boundaries of an RGS. If, for example, the area were remote from the fast-growing areas of the region and, in their opinion, unlikely to benefit from participation. So is that aligned with what you're saying? I'm just trying to understand, because that would have to go to the board for, the director would have to make the motion to the board to say, I think we're not going to benefit participation? That's my question.
Yeah, through you, Chair, to Director Martman. So I think the operative word in that statement is advocate.
Okay.
Right? And so, yes, this is your opportunity as an individual electoral area to advocate for your area to not be included in a regional growth strategy. I would counter that you are immediately next to a very fast-growing region, and that participation in a regional growth strategy may actually be of benefit to an area that actually doesn't want growth.
Right, is
So
that the
it's just
municipality of North Cowichan or the RDN?
That's the regional district of Nanaimo, yes.
Second question, if I may? And thank you, it wasn't, I just like to understand process.
Yeah.
So I'm not advocating at this point one way or the other, because I think I have a lot more questions or learning to do at this table right now. I think the next question is really trying to understand when you enter into a regional growth strategy, what is it that will enable success? Because I look at having OCPs in place is sort of one of the, from my perspective, one of the foundations to having a regional growth strategy. So are we setting ourselves up for success if we have our MOCP as electoral areas not there yet? Like we're coming up to hopefully draft 2, but we're not there. And so to start a regional growth strategy, like how do we set the table for success? What are the components that should be on that table? And is having a finished OCP that's been sort of validated and out there part of that setting the table?
Through you, Chair. So there is a complete OCP for the electoral areas. There is an update to that OCP now underway, substantially underway, and the timeline for completion, I think we've looked at now around the end of the year, hopefully. I would say that that is not an impediment to initiate a regional growth strategy. One of the first things that needs to happen in the process of developing a regional growth strategy is to do an assessment of infrastructure and servicing, both existing and proposed, and looking at the capacity for existing and proposed infrastructure to service what might be projected growth. And I think what we're probably going to find through that process is that there's some misalignment between what can actually be done and what some of the OCPs have identified as being possible. And I don't want to put Director Abbott on the spot, but I'm going to. And I think he'll be okay with that. When the housing needs assessments were completed, there was a number that was identified for the Cowichan Bay electoral area, and I think it's around 600 units. And I cannot, as a professional planner, identify where those 600 units are going to go in electoral area D, Cowichan Bay. So that is one example. We can start looking at the housing needs reports that have been completed and identifying, the growth that's predicted and objectively be able to decide, is that, is that realistic, right? Or should it be going somewhere else? Or are those housing needs reports even accurate? I mean, that's another question, right? So there's a lot of technical work that needs to be done. And the great thing about doing that technical work is that you'll have factual information to help ground your decisions. The decisions you make on development applications, the decisions you make on transportation decisions, et cetera.
Thank you, Chair.
Director Segal.
Thanks, Chair. I have 2 questions, if that's okay. So I'll start with the first one, is just, you mentioned South Cowichan and that, it's a contentious issue potentially. So I'm just trying to understand, how the process of an RGS can help support, all of the issues that were just identified in the South Cowichan issues assessment. Or if that process is not at all a part of an RGS and is a separate governance study, is there a way that the RGS helps South Cowichan in this process?
Through you, Chair, to Chair Director Chair Segal. The RGS, I mean, one of the concerns that the steering committee had with that was that a study around incorporation could potentially derail an RGS process. But it can certainly inform decisions around future incorporation of the South Cowichan. There will be a report that comes back to committee on the community issues assessment. There were a number of recommendations coming out of that report, and a number of those things are actually already underway and are related to things that would be naturally dealt with through the regional growth strategy. So, and that's a difficult process. I mean, complicated by perhaps perceptions around what, may or may not happen with costs and taxes, et cetera, right? And so, so I think that the RGS can certainly provide input to that side of the equation.
And just as a follow-up on that question, does that need to be referenced at this stage of our, like in the resolutions, there's nothing mentioning South Cowichan, but you're saying it still will, no matter what, it will support in informing a potential governance process?
Yes, that is my belief. And there is, I mean, obviously there is a second and third option in the report, and in the second option there is, you know, the opportunity to kind of to highlight that and to specifically perhaps identify South Cowichan through that resolution, but I don't think it's necessary.
Right, okay. And now, can I do my official second question? I know I had to follow. Thank you. I just wanted you to elaborate on how an RGS can help prevent urban and rural sprawl and protect electoral areas.
So through the chair, the OCPs provide a certain amount of control around the designation of land uses for, you know, agricultural or resource-based activities that would largely preclude development. Although they, you know, they're documents that can be easily, I wouldn't say easily, but they can be amended, right? And so changes can happen. And you know, under that scenario, municipalities and electoral areas kind of continue to work in isolation, not with the sort of the region in mind. The nice thing about a regional growth strategy is you had to have the sort of the big picture around what are the region's needs in terms of environmental sustainability, food security. You can kind of ask those bigger questions and identify the areas that truly need to be preserved for those purposes, and then allow growth to perhaps happen around. I think it provides that really good high-level guidance, and ideally this, you know, board agrees on that direction and sticks to it.
Director Acton.
I have two kind of separate questions. How does the RGS support, for example, in South Cowichan, some of the lack of servicing and lack of proper development, like exactly what it's trying to prevent, but help fix some of those errors that have happened in the past, like whether they're like satellite communities, are they going to remain just this satellite community out there in no man's land? And how to kind of sweep up some of the poor development decisions that have been made. Does that sound like is my question clear?
Yeah, I think so, through you, Chair, to Director Acton. So we have a major sort of, we have a major concern with servicing in the South Cowichan. There have been efforts. We have I think 25-year-old liquid waste management plan, and there have been attempts to sort of update that in recent years, and it's been somewhat shelved. We would look through the RGS process to resurrect that process, and to also to look at the Inova report that was completed about 7 or 8 years ago, and update that to provide some good guidance around infrastructure investments, which makes sense to support the growth that's projected.
Yeah, so you led to my other question what role would the liquid waste management plan play? So you've kind of like touched on it a bit, but I guess specifically for South Cowichan, because it's a whole bunch of pie in the sky dreams of making servicing work. So how would it incorporate it exactly, though? Like, how is this a good idea for moving those issues forward?
So I sort of have Clay Reitzma's voice in my head right now, because the municipality of North Cowichan's very recently gone through a process of looking at their existing infrastructure, looking at planned growth and identifying the what needs to happen in terms of infrastructure investments to service that growth. I think there was, in fact, an article in the paper today about that. We need to do the same sort of thing with electoral area services, and we need to do the same thing in relation to the improvement district services. Looking at, the status of those systems, those water and sewer systems, and, what's going to be needed in order to support growth that's projected, and what that's going to cost. And we don't know.
Can I just have a follow-up? So I'll try and make this my last one. So I know you introduced the concept of incorporation in the South as like this controversial thing, and I don't think we need to introduce it as that. That it's not. We're not saying let's incorporate right now. The question is, when is it time? It's not, is it time? When will it be time? It will be time at some point, whether we hit a certain number, a certain population, a certain tax base, a certain growth, or we become part of Langford or whatever. What it's going to happen. It's just a matter of like, when does it happen? So can we start using language that says when it makes sense for South Cowichan to, like, so how can we incorporate that kind of mentality into this continuation conversation, regional growth strategy, so that we don't have a steering committee thinking it's controversial, a political thing, like.
Chair, I'm not sure I can answer the question, and I don't know if Ms. Miles Wilson.
Well, we have
has a
this plan
response
that's
for you, but-
moving. The plan is, when does it make sense?
Is this on? Okay.
Miles Wilson.
Yeah, and I'll just speak back to the South Cowichan Community Issues Assessment and just reiterate some of these points and then get to your specific comment. And so, as Ms. Charoff has said, there's recommendations within the South Cowichan Community Issues Assessment which will be addressed through the RGS process right up front around coordinating infrastructure on a regional basis. That was the top thing in the list. And so these things will get woven into this process and effectively can be implemented through this process. So there's a number of things in there that you'll see kind of get legs if this proceeds. Related to governance, back to that study, it says, it talks about options for further identifying governance improvements for the South Cowichan. And so that's what a governance study would be investigating, is incorporation is one option, but a governance study would be exploring multiple options, including things like local area commissions and consolidating advisory bodies. And it would be looking at the full gamut so that you have everything in front of you to consider should you get up to a push to kind of move forwards with incorporation of the South. So you'll recall a couple years ago that we did take a look at whether to proceed with a governance and servicing study. At that time, it wasn't supported, and we took this incremental preliminary approach to do that issues assessment to kind of ease into this exploration. And so the provincial government would receive another application if we do want to take a look at governance options for the South. That's an option for us to explore. And we can come back with an analysis of those options as well. So I guess is what I'm saying is you're going to get some of your issues assessment moving forwards through an RGS process. And should we want to have a further conversation about governance in the South, we can come back and provide you some advice on how that can be done in tandem with the processes that are currently going on. Does that?
Okay, thank you.
All right, thanks. I'm going to now move on to Director Callio.
Thank you, Chair. I believe fundamentally in the RGS. I think we need to coordinate the different areas together to make sure that we have, and other jurisdictions, so we have smart growth across the whole of the area. And that includes North Cowichan, Ladysmith, South End, the whole works. My question is, how will the RGS affect existing developments that are underway in the CVRD and other jurisdictions such as Ladysmith and North Cowichan and the city of Duncan? is it going to be an overriding document that's we are going to be locked into, or like our OCP at North Cowichan, it can have amendments, things can be changed?
Through you, Chair. So once an RGS has been adopted, there's a 2-year time frame during which the CVRD and municipal official community plans would need to be amended to align with the regional growth strategy. Having said that, when applications are made for subdivision under the zoning regulations that are in place at a particular time, those applications are protected. There's a period of time over which those applications are protected. So the legislation somewhat sort of local government act anticipates that, you know, OCPs and RGSs and zoning bylaws can change, but there is a period of time during which owners and developers are protected on their applications. And certainly, it really comes down to, you know, how firm would the regional growth strategy be, right? In terms of redirecting growth if necessary. I can't imagine any growth really being redirected away from municipalities.
Follow up, Director Kallio?
Yeah, in conjunction with your answer to my question, if there's existing developments in North Cowichan that are longer than the 2 years away, because some of these developments could be upwards of 5 years, 6 years in development, that grandfathering of 2 years, is that carried forward because that development was already in there, or is it the end of the 2-year period of time? Is that like a gate that comes down and says, no, you're done, sorry, you had your 2 years to get your development done?
Well, I would suggest that, through the chair, that if North Cowichan, for instance, wants to see those developments proceed, that that would be the input that would be brought back to the RGS. And again, there's a process for municipal councils to decide whether or not they want to accept an RGS. And if they don't like what's in the RGS, then they have the option to not accept it. And so I just can't imagine a scenario where there is significant planned developments that are, you know, well underway that wouldn't sort of be captured and included in an RGS going forward.
Okay,
There would have to be some very serious reasons for not accommodating that type of growth.
Okay, thank you.
Director Justice.
Right, thank you. Let me start just by note to my colleague over there. I've always assumed that, you know, if anything, there's going to be enhanced growth pressure on municipalities under an RGS. If that makes you, if that helps at all. But my question was, you were mentioning that one of the great things about an RGS is that it could provide some high-level guidance on things like food security and climate change, and how settlement patterns and growth policy could affect those things. You also mentioned that there's if we go ahead with an RGS, there's a regional conservation strategy happening in parallel. Can you elaborate a little bit on how those two things would work together, the regional growth strategy, the regional conservation strategy, and how they would inform each other? And I mean, it's not overlap, but they would be building some sort of a synergy, or how do they fit together?
Thank you for the question, through the chair. I think that, like other sort of sources of information that we would rely on to prepare the RGS, the conservation strategy could provide some great information around, you know, environmental constraints in areas that, you know, should be protected. There might also be an opportunity to identify lands that should be acquired for the purposes of conservation, and that could be accommodated through growth that occurs in another area. So there's an opportunity for synergy, but certainly I think it would provide great background to substantiate, you know, determining where future growth should go and where it shouldn't go.
Right.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks, Anne. It's infrastructure is the big word here. And this has been highlighted many times in the past few weeks with North Cowichan. But servicing implementation, I think you mentioned just now. So I'm going to ask a what-if question here and ask you to look into your crystal ball. For instance, Cobble Hill has one of the most advanced waste systems anywhere. Thank you to engineering. They've done a brilliant job right from the start, from the initial installation to any problems which have come up. They did it very quickly. They did it very efficiently. And they did it because it was localized and it was authorized by the CVRD and Area C. What would have been the situation if even if you can answer this one, if there was a regional growth strategy and that system wasn't in place, how would it have been done then? Would we then have to go to a regional board and say, we want a wastewater system, can we have it please? Whereas before it was done very quickly, very efficiently. Would we have to go to another body to say, we want this system, and how long would it take? Is that kind of it's a what if question, I know.
I'm not, through you, Chair, I'm not sure I'm equipped to answer that question. I mean, a lot of the regional district, the electoral area zoning bylaws have, you know, the minimum lot size is based on the level of servicing provided. So I'm not familiar with the context and the, you know, the reasons why that system was developed and how it was paid for. So I'm sorry, I can't
And
answer.
Mr. Chair, my concern here obviously is if any other area wanted a system to be installed and there was a regional growth strategy in place, are we now up against another committee to get something done? Or can we just say, look, this is my area, we've got the money, we've got the will. Do we go on with it? Or do we have to now go to somebody else and ask the question? There's my fear right there.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Chair, I guess a comment, and it's one that's a bit anecdotal, but I have heard from other, you know, planning professionals who work with regional growth strategies is that, you know, having the plan in place can also be beneficial to obtaining infrastructure grants. Because they're substantiated and grounded in fact.
Good. Thank you, Anne.
Director Martman.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks, Ann, for working through all our questions. And you know, what worries me is about some things is I don't know what I don't know, and I'm trying to tease out, you know, where those areas are. But I do believe I know my area, and we're not an urban extension. And I think this is where growth boundaries, density targets, and subdivision pressures, they're not area H's. They don't always apply to area H. But what does apply is land decision-making use, or use of our land. And so the question is, and I have a couple of these that fall under this, can we retain the ability to guide our own land use under an RGS? Is that possible? Because that's sort of a deal breaker in the back of my head.
Mm-hmm. Through the chair, so regional growth strategies, you know, the high-level strategy for growth, OCPs, you know, would be amended to align with that. But then the decisions around development applications that come before municipalities or municipal councils or electoral area services committee continue to be dealt with at the local level. So requests for variances continue to be dealt with at the local level. Requests for rezoning continue to be dealt with at the local level. It's only when, you know, a request would come forward that would collide with the goals of the RGS and perhaps the OCP, where you would perhaps need to then go through a process of seeking to amend an RGS. But if you go through a process and partnership and collaboration, that's done well, and the interests of the respective communities are represented in the RGS, then that's not going to be an issue.
Follow up? It may have two, if that's okay, Chair. I think you touch on, it's about the engagement in creating the regional growth strategy. And I guess, online surveys, farmers markets in Duncan, open houses in Duncan don't meet the needs of Area H. I think that's been put across a number of times. We need in-person outreach. Like, we need people coming to our community center. We need, even come and have a coffee, like somehow. And I'm probably way ahead of the process here, but that's a piece I just need to put on the table. Like that, without that, how do we get a voice? And the community has to have a voice in this. So probably not less of a question than the next one. I think the next concern is about regional growth strategy. Who drives the bus on this? Because our needs in a rural area and policies that come up out of a regional growth strategy that direct energy, effort, and money towards urban areas at the expense of rural. And so how do you get that right balance? And that's a piece that is very important to me, because having, if you say, hey, rural agriculture, we want to protect it, we want those, but does that mean we don't get certain things, we don't get the resources that we need to maintain it? And so I guess I'm looking for, how do you strike that balance? Is that something that a regional growth strategy can address? Or is that something you have to fight for tooth and nail every time a policy comes up or direction of money?
Through you, Chair. So ultimately, it's this board. This board decides, what that strategy looks like and how it's structured, and what the balance is in terms of growth, no growth, and allocation of resources. But, if an area wishes to not see a lot of growth, but, it has a strong interest in, let's say, your area preserving the agriculture base, but there are challenges to doing that because of financial reasons, and perhaps there are financial mechanisms that can be put in place where development can, some of the benefit from development could actually be redirected to supporting agriculture, right? So there are lots of interesting sort of options that can be looked at.
And it's more than just like agriculture. It's about resilience of a community. About you think about the different emergency things that are occurring around our communities, whether it's fire, flooding, a variety of things. One day, the oceans are apparently going to rise, and we're going to miss portions of our roads in Area H too. I mean, maybe around the district. And so those are the kind of things that I think play into it, as well as we're on wells, and the infrastructure required, or that for people to maintain their own wells and their own septics, are there ever going to be supports for
Director
people?
Martman?
Yep, thank you.
I really appreciate
I'm not
your
asking
comments.
a question. Yeah,
Gone,
thank you.
Moved away from
Thank you.
questions, but
Thanks,
thank you.
sorry.
It's all good.
Bring me back in line.
All right, Director Abbott.
Thank you, Chair. Around the table, it just seems that, like a lot of human nature, there's a reluctance to perhaps embrace change, which I sense that the RGS is putting before us. Ms. Charoff has already alluded to the fact that Cowichan Bay has a rather impractical, unrealistic housing needs assessment. This is compounded by the practical observation that we have an improvement district that has no longer got any more connections available for any more houses in, now, it's not the only purveyor of water. We do have a number of us on wells, but it's a major contributor to more housing stock. So there's a pragmatic or a practical observation of where we can't grow, and we're a very small district, and a way out possibly is by looking at infrastructure, combining an improvement district with a CVRD facility to perhaps deliver water to Cowichan Bay. And densify, it makes a lot of sense to densify in Cowichan Bay and stay away from urban sprawl. I just throw it out there as an alternative to some of the concerns about growing in an urban sprawl. So as Ms. Charles pointed out, it's a closed house. The season is closed for construction in Cowichan Bay at present. Thank you.
Thanks to Director Abbott. I didn't hear a question, but I'm going to let that one go. All right, so as we move into discussion, I just wanted to provide a few comments to help guide us through with the next however long we're going to be discussing this item. So one is, Ms. Curtis mentioned the background on how we got here today, and I think this is important because as directors, we get these big agenda packages. There's a significant amount of information. I think all of us at times have some difficulty remembering, when did we give direction for this particular item? When did this come to the board? When did this come to the committee? So I just wanted to quickly go over a bit of the timeline. So if you recall, in our first year together as a board between March and October of 2023, we did 3 separate facilitated strategic planning sessions. And that was where we reviewed our strategic plan, determined what actions we wanted to continue pursuing and whether there were any new projects we wanted to take on. The regional growth strategy was a major topic of discussion in all 3 of those sessions. Where we landed was that many of us were ready to move ahead with the regional growth strategy, but there was others who had questions, who weren't necessarily against it, but wanted to be in a position to make an informed decision before voting on whether or not to proceed. So what the board did was, and you recall this was in October of 2023, we updated our strategic plan to include as an action item, direct staff to organize a board workshop to learn more about the regional growth strategy. And the thinking was that after that workshop, we would then make a decision on whether or not to proceed. We then held that workshop in November of 2023. So it was organized by staff. Our planning team gave us a presentation on kind of what was involved in a regional growth strategy and where they saw some potential benefits. We also had a presentation from the provincial government. So the Ministry of Municipal Affairs actually sent their one of their leading land use and regional growth specialists to present to us. And then we also heard from a representative from the Comox Valley Regional District. So they actually sent one of their directors who's in one of the unincorporated rural areas to speak to what he saw as some of the advantages of a regional growth strategy. That was in November of 2023. The province, seeing that there was interest in the CVRD in pursuing this as a potential project, in March of the following year gave us a $250,000 grant to pursue this exercise. Staff then, as Ms. Kurjev mentioned, brought a report back to us in June of 2024 seeking our direction on how to proceed. And so we passed a number of resolutions in that June 2024 meeting, but I just want to draw your attention to a couple of them. One of them that we did direct staff to develop a request for proposals to hire a consultant to develop the regional growth strategy. We also directed staff to update our strategic plan to read under action 2.1, work collaboratively with member municipalities and First Nations towards the development of a regional growth strategy. Subsequently, staff came back to us in October of last year, and the board passed a resolution directing staff to share some of these materials on the regional growth strategy with the member municipalities and the Electoral Area Services Committee. There was also a request to appoint a representative to a steering committee to oversee this exercise and to provide comments on some of the additional matters that were put forward for consideration, including future growth and development around the Nanaimo Airport and the Cassidy Aquifer. That steering committee, as Ms. Kurjev mentioned, met in February and was able to discuss these items, and that's informed inform the report that was brought for us here today. So just wanted to go over a bit of the timeline. Again, we get overwhelmed with all kinds of information, and I know Director Segal and I both did kind of a deep dive, and I'm sure many of you did as well, and really look back at the documentation just to get a sense of how we arrived here today. So this wasn't something that staff kind of brought forward out of the blue. There was a series of steps that led us here to this discussion. There were also questions asked about the project costs. These can be quite costly exercises. So if you'll recall, as I just mentioned, the province provided us with that $250,000 grant. We also received a significant amount of funding from the province for the Growing Communities Fund, like all other local governments. And staff have cut off $250,000 of that to put towards this exercise. So that's $500,000 for this project, and that's been built into our 2025 budget. The other point as well, and we heard this when the province presented to us last November, or November of 2023, so yeah, over a year ago now, the province has identified what they call high growth regions. So what they call a region, I would think of more as a macro region, but they've identified 3 of them, and this is all on the publicly available information on the BC government website. But they've got the Lower Mainland, Southern Vancouver Island, and the Okanagan Valley. And again, we've talked about this in our previous discussions. I'm not trying to sway anyone here, just bringing this up as a matter of fact, is that if you look at these 3 macro regions, we do stand out a bit. With the Okanagan Valley, the Okanagan, Similkameen, Central Okanagan, and North Okanagan, each one of those regional districts has an RGS. If you look at the Lower Mainland, Metro Van, Fraser Valley, and Squamish-Lillooet each have an RGS. And if you look at Southern Vancouver Island, there's Comox, Nanaimo, Capital Regional District. So we do stand out a bit there. And from the provincial perspective, and again, we heard this at the workshop, their thinking is that an RGS is a great tool to help us not only achieve our local, regional objectives, but also to support provincial priorities around housing and environmental protection and climate change. Again, not saying that to try to direct you any one way or another, but just want to keep in mind some of the provincial expectations, why they would go through the effort of sending us $250,000 to support this exercise. Another couple points really quick. Each of us, we represent an electoral area, we represent a municipality. Those are the people that elected us here. The people of Area A or the people of the town of Lake Cowichan did not elect me to this position. So obviously, I'm always looking out for the interests of my own residents. I think we all do that. But it's so important to take that regional perspective. And I'm not here to lecture anyone. I don't always do it as much as I should have, but the regional growth strategy really is about looking at what's best for the entire region rather than our own area. And I do acknowledge that can be a real challenge for, I think, all of us around this table at times. The other point here is just in terms of next steps. So we've had a bunch of decision points that have brought us here today, going back to March of 2023. The resolution, there's 4 motions before us today, a resolution to formally initiate this. I think everyone appreciates this from reading the report, but just want to highlight it, is that today isn't like we vote on this item and then that's it. There's a number of decision points beyond this meeting that Ms. Kirchhoff and Ms. Miles Wilson highlighted. So there's going to be an engagement strategy that staff would develop if we decide to proceed. That will come back to us. Requests for proposals will come back to us. Terms of reference will come back to us. And this isn't an exercise that's going to be wrapped up in a couple months. As the staff report highlights, this is a project that will extend over 3 years and will be wrapped up well into 2027 beyond the next election cycle. So again, I'm anticipating we're going to have a great discussion here, and just would encourage everyone, let's keep it as respectful as we can. There's a lot of different viewpoints around the table here, but I think we're all here because we care about the common good, we care about the public interest, and let's just keep that in mind as we hear alternative viewpoints that we may not always agree with. We have some staff recommendations. I understand there's a couple amendments have been brought forward. So one relates, I think, from Alternate Director Lochner with regards to environmental protections. We can consider that, and Director Segal and Director Acton have another recommended motion around boundary readjustments and South Cowichan, which we can consider as part of the discussion as well. So on that note, I'll open it up now for discussion, and I'm going to turn first to Director Morrison.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I think I should probably ask to deal with the first item first, and that is on what basis or urgency is anything that's discussed today going to this afternoon's board? I'll stop there. The recommendation says it goes to April 9th board. I'm would expect something as weighty as this to be at least given the normal process of going 2 weeks hence. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, thanks for the question, Director Morrison. I know you and I discussed this briefly yesterday. From my view, ultimately, this is up to the committee to decide. My preference would be to move it forward, but I think it's up to us as a collective body to decide if we want to refer this motion to the board meeting this afternoon or to a future meeting. Follow-up, Director Morrison?
Sure. Just a general comment. I will have a resolution, at least one resolution, and one will be to exclude the areas within the jurisdiction of electoral area F for the, in resolution 1. And I just want to note that I'm really struggling with this in that I think that my perception of the overall initiative, I was probably more open-minded to this when we initially started this exercise, and I'm really feeling the pressure that this is being sold in a big way. And
Director Segal. There you go.
We just don't have a motion on the floor yet, so I'm wondering if we should save debate for once we have a motion.
Yeah, I'm trying not to be too directive here, but I think that's a great point. We can certainly just kind of offer our general opinions on this whole exercise, or if we want to kind of focus our discussion a bit more, if someone wants to get a motion on the floor, then we can debate that. The amendment? Yeah, we've got a couple of.
Recess and add all the amendments, maybe?
Yeah, okay. Director Segal. Sorry, it says Director Douglas, so it's a bit confusing. Continue.
I can be Director Douglas today. I just wanted to move the option 1, the recommended resolution, to get that on the floor, and then we can make amendments.
Okay, so it's moved by Director Segal, seconded by Director Staples. So I'm going to get back to the queue here, and Director Morrison, further comments?
yeah, I'd like to amend this resolution by excluding the lands within electoral area F.
Okay, so it's been moved. Is there a seconder? Seconded by Director McClinton to speak to the amendment?
Yes, please.
Director Morrison? Yeah, Director Acton?
Me.
Now,
We know that, sorry, Director Morrison, but we know that there's a lot of amendments, and to just argue amendment after amendment, could we not like make this all together and know what all these amendments are? Because it's hard to, I find it really hard to make decisions based on what you think's coming or you don't know what's coming. Could we look at it as a whole?
yeah, I guess the challenge is,
At least have it written in front of us, like take a recess and put it all together?
I think that the challenge for me is I don't know who else is going to have amendments. I'm aware of yours and Director Segal's and the one from alternate Director Lochner as well, but I wasn't aware Director Morrison had this other
Right.
amendment, and others may have additional amendments they'd like to bring forward.
So how are we gonna do it?
So
People are
what
just
I
gonna
was,
give their amendments and we're gonna vote on them, adding them, and
yeah, my thinking is we've got the staff recommendation that's been moved, so we can consider this one amendment, and depending on what happens with that, then we move on to the next one, and then we move on to the next one. So then we would get through the 3 of them, and if there's others, then we could consider those separately as well.
seems
challenging.
Director Morrison?
Thank you. Just given that this is a, well, it's been presented as a multi-level, broad picture exercise. This is a land use additional level of, I would interpret as restriction. And I look at the inclusion of Area F in this when you consider the fact that this electoral area is greater than 50% of the entire regional district. And to be included in a regional growth strategy in which I just don't feel that we've met the engagement with community, even, and I know this is a later discussion, but the steering committee, advisory committee, I just don't feel that there's been significant enough engagement to convince me as an elected official that participating in this at this time makes sense and is beneficial to not only my community, but the region as a whole. So I would encourage my colleagues to support excluding electoral area F from the RGS.
Okay, so I've got a queue here, but I'm going to start with those who want to speak to the amendment to exclude Area F. Do you want to give me a signal? Okay. Director Segal.
I really appreciate Director Morrison's perspective, but I guess I just, excuse me, would like to share that we really would like him to join in this collaborative process and to go step by step along the way, and to share that I don't want to force you into anything along the way, to make sure that for Area F, the regional growth strategy complements what works for your residents. So I would like to include you in that collaborative process.
Director Staples.
Yes, and further to that, the whole idea of this is that it is a regional growth strategy. So how do we have a conversation about that if we're starting to hive off areas within the region? You know, we talk about efficiencies at this board all the time. Working collaboratively on a strategy for the best needs of our future in multiple areas that impact us is the best way forward. And as has been clarified, there are so many places along this road where where discussions can be had specific to certain regions and their expectations and what they need. But for us to be able to plan efficiently and effectively for the future, the only way we can do that is together as a region. Otherwise, there's not even a point in this table existing if we're not, you know, if we're not looking at us as a in a holistic way. So I'm sorry that I can't support your motion, because you are a part of the whole.
So I've got a queue here. Okay, I'm going to go to Director McClinton, and then if everyone else can kind of give me a signal after if you want to speak to the amendment or to the. Okay, I'm going to go to Ms. Miles Wilson, then to you, Director McClinton.
Offering information that will help with this. And I don't have the Local Government Act in front of me, but I know our very capable corporate officer does at the moment. And so just for clarity regarding exclusions, there is a legislative process for that. And I was wondering if Ms. Boyd could please read that just so everyone is aware of how this would proceed.
Thank you, Danielle, CAO. So Section 430 of the Local Government Act, area to which a regional growth strategy applies. unless authorized under subsection 2, required by regulation under section 431, which is the one before this, it's an entire section. A regional growth strategy must apply to all of the regional district for which it is adopted. On the request of applicable boards, the board and boards, the minister may authorize regional growth strategy that applies to only part of a regional district. It is developed jointly by 2 or more regional districts to apply, et cetera, et cetera. So we can consult with our other neighboring regional districts. So with, with an exemption, it would be at the discretion of the minister to review. And I'm just trying to find the section as well on that.
All right, we can come back to that, I think. Director McClinton?
Thank you, Chair. I would like to amend the amendment and have Area G be included. If I can get a seconder, I'd like to speak to it.
Sorry, Area G to be excluded as well?
Yes.
Okay, so I believe we can amend an amendment. So it's moved?
Point of order.
Yeah, Director Segal. I know, I'm sorry.
I'm just unclear if what we just heard from Legislative Services actually means we can't make that motion. It's actually a request to the minister. Just to understand the process there.
Yeah, it's a good point because we can pass a resolution, but if it has no teeth, and kind of what's the point of doing so? Staff like to weigh in on this? Ms. Miles Wilson? There we go.
Sorry, I'll just reiterate a point that Ms. Charles made towards the beginning, and that the operative word is advocate. So our understanding is that this board, this committee recommending to the board would define the scope of this initiation request to the province. But we understand that the authority around the scope rests with the minister. So the interest and intent would be expressed, and we would be potentially either being directed or it may be accepted.
All right, so it's moved and seconded. You want to speak to it?
Yeah. I'll try to be brief. This is by far the most frustrated and I'll keep this one feeling and then get to some of my points. This is by far the most frustrated I've ever been at this board table. I am happy to work with colleagues around this table, but to lock into a regional growth strategy, how do we know where we're going to be in 5, 10, 15, 20 years from now? This feels just so incredibly undemocratic to me. And this is the people of Saltaire don't want this. The people of Thetis don't want this, Penelakut, Ruxton. And at the very least, I would have hoped that this would have gone out for public input or referral. I'm holding up, I got this today. This is our official community plan. Like, I haven't even had a chance to read through this. I mean, at the very least, we have an opportunity. We're going to be meeting with our APCs. I think that's a great opportunity to find out what the people of the electoral areas would want and how this is going to impact them. And, you know, and with all due respect to the director for Couch and Bay, you know, I feel for the issues that are going on there, but that, you know, why does Area G have to lock into something that they don't want? We simply just want to be left alone to be able to make the land use decisions that are best for us. And this just feels like a massive layer of bureaucracy that's going to make it difficult for us to do anything, you know, down the road. And I've met with dozens of people, both inside of government, outside of government, and the only answer I've been given about why this is a good idea is that I have a decision in what happens in your area, and you have a decision in what happens in my area. But we all know that the centers that have the population density have the trump card, and we're virtually giving up our autonomy, our ability to make decisions in the future. And I couldn't be I'm doing my best to be as diplomatic as I can. I couldn't be more opposed to this. I hope you'll support, the people of Area G, which now, between the two areas, makes up well over 60% of the geographic area in the CBRD.
Yeah, and I'm going to try to limit the editorializing as the chair, but if we're going to start carving off huge chunks of the region, then we might as well just put this thing to bed. I'm going to turn to Director Justice.
Yeah, thank you. I did have some comments I wanted to make just in general about the regional growth strategy, but to this point, I'll just briefly say, so if you can come back to me after we've decided on this. I think that this is a premature amendment, that we should get through this process and we should decide whether we're going to initiate a regional growth strategy, and at some point later decide about whether or not all regions, all areas in the region are going to be part of it. So I might at some point, but not now, be able to support a motion to remove some areas from the regional growth strategy.
Director Segal. Oh, no, sorry, I've got Director Magano.
Thank you, Chair. I appreciate the angst within my two fellow directors. I had some apprehension when this was first broached as to what the intent truly was. And it certainly wasn't for the town of Lake Cowichan to extend its boundaries into 50% of the regional district. I think it was to look at how smart regional growth could be implemented given the deficiencies which have been established within our housing needs assessment, for instance. So incorporating a realistic approach to the housing needs assessment, not only region by region, but area by area. And understanding the autonomy of rural electoral areas who wish to keep that. So it could be as simple as incorporating the harmonized OCP and the existing OCPs of municipalities as a starting point for the regional growth strategy. And implementing those who wish to advocate for opting out, that option to put that forward to the minister as stated, which resides within the legislation. I would hope that we can at least look at that possibility, given the timeline of how long this could take. The harmonized OCP should be implemented prior to the regional growth strategy being established. With those guiding documents and the focus on urbanized areas for the growth that should reside within those areas which can accommodate it, would be established within those OCPs, whether it be municipal, whether it be the harmonized OCP, or local decisions that are made by local area directors on development. I consider the deficiencies not only within our municipalities for growth in the numbers that I have been given in the housing needs assessment. My infrastructure will not accommodate that. But without a regional growth strategy, do I have the clout to establish grant applications to accommodate those funds? I think with a true regional growth strategy, that's another tool for an option for that avenue. Thank you.
Director Acton.
You're good to go.
Thank you.
Oh yeah, Director Acton,
Am I-
I was just being reminded here, we're speaking on the amendment to the amendment, so
Yes.
as to add
Yes.
Area G along with
I
Area
just
I.
wanted to highlight, there's a lot of mixed emotions going on here now, I thought, and I can actually respect that. So I hear that this is really something that's it's not up to deciding right now, but yet we had an introduction from the chair that we've done this. We've spent money, we've allocated money. So this is this kind of mixed message that happens a lot in government, that we've gone through all these steps, so now we're in it. And so the apprehension is coming up. I feel it. Like, is this a good decision? I feel that every single time this conversation comes up, and every single time we're reminded of what we've already done and where it's gonna go and all these promises. And right now, I'm also thinking about how we have another message of disrespecting previous boards. We had the same thing with the conversation that it was brought up today, that South Cowichan's needs were not respected. Or it wasn't, because we had a new board. The new board didn't see the value that the previous board had and the previous one before that. And South Cowichan, had to stand out on its own. And you've mentioned today in your introduction that, we're all going to rise together. And so then again, the areas are feeling like, oh, but that's not true. Sorry, I kind of lost my train of thought on that one completely. But so our previous board, again, we had a collab, like I hear, oh, the regional growth strategy is going to be, it's about collaboration, it's about working together. We had a collaborative document. We had a document that won awards. We had the 2050, and so we ignored that. So we spent money on that, and now we're doing it again. So I'm getting a bit of a mixed message on behaviors that we've done and things that we've decided previous boards didn't quite cut it. So I guess we have a lot of information that has come forward on this regional growth strategy, and we're hearing, so I'm kind of repeating
Director
myself.
Atkin, I don't want
but-
to cut you off, but
I know.
can we focus it just on the
Well, because
including
it's
area?
falling apart now. So our collaboration is falling apart.
But right now,
It's because we're getting mixed messages. So we're hearing that this is just a process and we can opt out later, and actually that's not true. I'll just stop there.
All right.
Clearly,
Yeah, I can come back to you, Director Atkin, if you like. I'm going to turn
Fine.
to.
Yeah, I haven't, that isn't even what, I have to say for South Cowichan.
So I'm going to turn to Director Beeston, and it's on the amendment to include Area G along with Area I. Exclude.
Sorry, I'm coming late to the table, so I don't have the fullest information on this. What I thought I heard staff state was that this is preparation of a regional growth system, and that everybody has to come to an agreement. In Ladysmith, we have our official community plan that we've been working on for 20 years. We are implementing it in collaboration with First Nations, who are not a part of this, but we're working very collaboratively with. So we have sort of two issues there. So my question is, they're asking now to be removed from this at the point in time when we start to negotiate the actual regional growth strategy. If any region or area is not able to agree with the collaboration going forward, can we at that point in time withdraw?
Yeah, I'll turn to staff, but my understanding is that this will come to the board for a vote, so the majority of the board would have to decide whether to adopt the regional growth strategy or not. But in terms of having a particular electoral area municipality excluded, we would have to apply to the minister and get their approval. But I'll turn to staff to correct me if I've got any of that wrong. Ms. Miles Wilson?
The first step is it needs to be the exclusion needs to be supported by this body to move forwards. And then we understand that the next step is with the province. Yeah. So there's a two-step process to that.
So if I'm understanding clearly, then there is a possibility that should the regional growth strategy be in conflict in any way with area's official community plan, they may not have the ability at that point in time to do anything about it if it's voted on by the board and the majority agrees that that's the direction they want to take?
Yeah, I think it would depend on how the regional growth strategy unfolds, but I know that the suggestion from Director McGonigal that he's made numerous times is that as kind of a bare bones regional growth strategy, we could sort of just stitch together the existing official community plans from the municipalities and the electoral areas, with the benefit there being that they're all relatively new and fresh, so should be fairly easy to build a regional growth strategy on top of that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thanks. Director Morrison.
Thank you, Chair. And I'll just, in regards to the amendment, are both actually, I feel this is appropriate and ask you to support because, I'm in this fool me once, shame on you, fool me twice, shame on me, and that we did Cowichan 2050 and didn't implement it. We've had staff working diligently on first the HOCP and now the MOCP and a comprehensive zoning bylaw. They're not even complete. We haven't even begun the implementation, and we're now adding another layer. I want to see the work that's been done come to fruition, and that's why I'm not wanting to launch into a regional growth strategy, and I support my colleague who's joined in this amendment, and I ask that you consider that and support the amendment.
Director Deck.
Thank you, Chair. I guess I'm thinking of what we share in common as opposed to our own particular area, and that's land and water and air. And I think that a strategic plan, the regional plan must include, and in the past, I'll just get going on few notes I've written here. So we acknowledge that because we share all these things together, the forests, air, water, and soil, we've made from federal to provincial to local, and then even nonprofit societies working for conservation. We've passed things like the 30 by 30 Conservation Promise, the Drinking Water and Watershed Protection Act, Climate Mitigation and Adaptation, Circular Economy, Solid Waste Program. So these kinds of things, could provide a foundation for us to see a common goal, and that is to integrate ecological, social, economic, and cultural dimensions, and not defined by a specific, by political or administrative zones, but by ecological and cultural zones. So I think even though there may be differences among us on some of these issues or how they're going to roll out, I would like us to think about what we share and what gives us the quality of life we want for ourselves and for future, for our children. So, I hope we'll consider working together because we share so much. Thank you.
Director Justice, were you
I was
for the general?
Late on hoping to speak to the entire regional.
Yeah,
strategy,
I'll come
but
back.
I do have
Okay.
something I'd like to add to what I said. Director Deck has inspired me to recognize that we've been, the directors who are proposing this are sort of focused on what I would call trepidation about the downsides, loss of control, and maybe added bureaucracy and difficulty in moving ahead. But I think also we have to balance that with some more thinking about the opportunities of collaborating regionally, as Director Deck just said. So, I think it's just too early to look at exclusions. Let's start this process and see where we get.
Director Martman.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, at this point, I'm not adding Area H to the group to be excluded, but I am very close. And the reason is that the decision-making for this puts them and us, and I don't like that at our board for this kind of decision. We should be finding a way to get all on the same page. And I don't feel like we're there. And maybe there's a yet that could be added to that. For me to vote or to tell another director, that the exclusion is, nice for your area to try that, but not to be able to support them is very, very difficult for me. And so, and it's also subject to a couple of other future decisions at this meeting that make a huge issue to me. One is this going to this afternoon's board, or are we going to wait to give it 2 weeks? That's big on what I decide next. The other thing is item number 2, because that really are, the item 2 puts 2 things in that are really important to Area H. And so it drives me to say, I want to be part of this RGS because I want a voice about Cassie Aquifer. I want a voice about, development around the Nanaimo Airport lands. That's important to Area H. And so I can take that leap of faith to say, I want to be part, I want to see that. That's really what it's saying to me. And I don't know how we get other directors to say, yeah, a seat at the table is really important, versus the reasons that they provide for us, and they're important reasons. So I guess, I don't know how do we resolve the timing of when this goes to the board, and I don't know how we resolve item 2, because if both of those come up and people vote against those things about going to 2 weeks or voting against Aqua, then I'm struggling, how do I vote now? So maybe, Chair, if those are things that, I don't know, it's the order of how this all unfolds, because I may want to offer a reconsideration if those things don't pass. And so that's my struggle. I don't know if there's a legislative way to through this. So, thank you.
Anything?
So is the first motion now being read that it be recommended to the board on April 9th, that number 1 occurs? Is that the motion on the floor?
No, there's a motion on the floor that has an amendment and then an amendment to the amendment. Once we deal with those amendments, we can consider a different date, but we're not there yet.
But that date is part of the motion.
Right now it is, but we can amend it. We can only have 2 amendments on the floor
okay.
at once. We can't add a third.
But I want to know what the first one is before this.
Yeah.
It's that it goes to today's board.
Yeah.
You can amend it after.
Which means what?
1 sec.
Oh. Okay, yeah. 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 Could we table the 2 amendments, Chair?
Hold on, I got 3 people talking at the same time.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah, but I got a cue here. All right, we'll now resume our committee of the whole meeting. Just so all the committee members know, I'm working with this new system here, which indicates who's in the queue. I know Director Wilson's had his hand up for a while, so apologies for that. I'm just working with this system, and there's some glitches here. So you are next, Director Wilson. So it's on the motion to amend the amendment. I'm going to turn to Director Wilson because he's been waiting patiently, but then I have a solution after that. I just want to run by the committee to help us kind of get through this logjam. Director Wilson.
I've got a red. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And I've got some stuff here that might calm me down a little bit here. The key phrase here that I've heard is more than once, another layer here. And we're only now halfway through the MOCP and OACPP. And I'm very tempted to make an amendment to the amendment of the amended amendment that's come through here. But, you know, and I can't, I won't, but I'm very close to saying I want to include Area C in this because we're not even halfway through the MOCP. Coralie's over there. She knows we have a meeting on Tuesday with my area planning committee to talk about the bylaw and the OCP here. But this is what I want now. Here's my question. I need clarity. Let's assume that I will support them and it goes through and they're excluded. That then goes to the minister. The minister says, I don't think so, right? Or he may even say, yeah, that's fine. Let's assume he says, I don't think so. Is that the end of it? Do they get another chance? No, they don't. And this is the whole point about it. If we are going to make an amendment to include them, knowing that there's a very, very high possibility that they will not be approved, why are we even bothering? You know, I will admit, I will support this. But I'm thinking, why? That's it. Thank you.
Thanks, Director Wilson. Corporate Officer has a comment on that.
Thank you, Chair. So again, on the request of the applicable board, the minister may authorize the regional growth strategy that applies to only part of the regional district. So this would be the board's direction of staff as well. Then they can order. If they order us, no legislation applies, and the order resides over legislation, and they will tell you what to do. So that's kind of how, if it happens.
Okay, so I've got a queue here, but I want to suggest something here. It's based on the comments earlier from Director Martman, and it's that we table these two amendments for a moment and go back to the date of the that this would be brought back to the board. And I'll acknowledge as well, Director Morrison raised this earlier in our discussion. So there seems to be some apprehension around having to refer this to the board and make the decision on initiating it this afternoon. So I'll suggest the board, one compromise could be that we would recommend this to the board meeting on April 23rd, which would give us a couple more weeks to think about it and decide if we want to take a different approach or not. So I'm going to ask the board if there's someone who would like to move that we table the two amendments, and I believe tabling motions, there's no debate. So moved by Director Eustache, seconded by Director Kallio. Call the question on tabling the two amendments. All in favor? And opposed? None opposed. Motion carries. So we'll now move back to the original motion. And Director Martman, you had suggested a delay, perhaps till the meeting on the 23rd. So would you like to move that we amend the motion to include that?
Yeah, I'd like to amend the...
All right, so the amendment's been moved. Is there a seconder? Seconded by Director Acton. Any discussion? Director Acton? Go for it.
Thank you. On the amendment, it's not a delay. It is actually a board practice that somehow has been lost with new employees and a new board. We have motions, it became, due to the public complaining that we would make decisions at committee of the whole and sometimes against the motion, and then it would get ratified at the board that day. So that was a request from the public to have opportunity to give input for 2 weeks. So, anyway, I just wanted to highlight that. I don't know why that has been lost, and it has been mentioned several times, and it just keeps happening. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Director Acton. So I've still got a queue here, but if it's not with, Director Segal.
Thank you. I just want to say I'll be supporting this, and I have a follow-up related referral motion once we deal with this one.
All right, we're ready for the question then? So Director McClinton?
I'm just a little lost with where we're at. Can you read out what are we voting on right now?
So it's, the staff recommendation is that it's be recommended to the board on April 9th, 2025, that the board initiate the RGS. So the amendment is that we change April 9th to April 23rd, so that we would have 2 weeks to consider the committee's referral, and if we decide we want to take a different approach at the board meeting, we can do that or refer it back here if we like. All right, so ready for the Director Beeston.
I wasn't going to speak to this particular amendment. I was going to speak to the amendment that had been brought up before.
Okay, understood. All right, so I'll call the question then on the amendment to refer this to the board meeting on April 23rd. All in favor? And opposed? None opposed, motion carries. So we've tabled these two amendments, and I'll just turn to the committee. Do we want to reinitiate the debate on these, or do we want to have a couple weeks to think about it and debate it at the board meeting? No, just the two amendments on excluding areas F and G. So we can do that now, but I think there is some information gaps, and I'll just throw it out there for consideration. We may be able to get more information from staff in the meantime, but I will turn to Director Segal.
Sorry, I had a quick referral motion just related to that, the date. I just wanted to make a referral motion to refer same-day committee reports to our governance committee for discussion with the procedures bylaw.
All right, so it's moved. Seconded by Director Morrison. Any discussion? I'll call the question. All in favor? And opposed? None opposed, motion carries. So we'll go back to those two tabled amendments and just looking for direction from the committee. Do we want to continue that debate, or do we want to have a couple weeks to think about it and maybe talk to staff to figure out what the options are? Director Acton?
I don't think it's isolated, because as Director Martman talked about, it's all encompassing. I think we should talk about it now. There's no gap in information we've heard from staff.
All right, if we're comfortable with it, then I think I'll need a motion to lift the tabled amendments. Moved by Director Segal, seconded by Director Acton. All in favor? And opposed? And opposed, motion carries. So we've got now amendment number 2 is excluding areas G and F from the motion that this be recommended to the board for April 23rd. So I've got Director Acton here.
I think, Director.
Sorry, Director Beeston, of course, you were in line. There you go.
Should we move forward with the plan, is there any option for the districts that opted out at this point in time to, in the future, be given the opportunity to opt back in if they're seeing that the plan is going to fit in with what their residents want them to do? And just on that, there's also the idea that, the whole reason they might be bringing this forward now is that not supporting them now might be indicative to them of the opportunity for support moving forward, and feeling that they may not actually have a voice in this, so.
Yeah, I'll turn to staff on this in terms of whether they want to, the two electoral areas could opt in at a later date. My understanding is even if we pass these motions, they can't actually opt out, that they will be included in this exercise. But once this process is nearing completion, then could apply to the minister to be excluded. But perhaps, Ms. Miles-Wilson, you want to clarify that?
Yeah, so I think at the direction of this committee and the board, we can notify the province immediately of the interest. But the first part of this exercise, just to go back to Ms. Cheryl's report, the first part of this exercise is in data and information collection, which will be, it's not as easy to just stay outside of a boundary for those types of things. For instance, services cross borders, our border, they might be somewhat arbitrary when you consider things like that. So it's just not a simple exercise to say, okay, we're going to stay out of that area completely and not, the servicing for Ladysmith and Area G, or, there may be issues there that are going to cross those borders. So just as a point of, I guess, clarity is that we would put forward your request if that should proceed, and then we would receive a provincial response on that, and we would come back with that information.
Great, thanks for that. Director Acton, and then I'd like to jump in.
Thank you.
Sorry, can you hit it one more time?
Why don't you go first?
All right, I'll be quick. I guess for me, the challenge with excluding areas G and F is this is very much a regional exercise, and like the comparison I would make is to the Cowichan Watershed Board. You look at the Cowichan Watershed Board, it includes the CVRD, it includes municipalities, it includes First Nations, it includes federal, provincial government representatives, each with their own areas of jurisdiction. They found a way to come together. We've got our board chair, the chief of Cowichan Tribes, co-chairing this structure, and it's cited right across Canada and internationally as a great example of reconciliation, of bringing us together. They take that very much, that whole watershed view, and if you listen to any of the folks involved in that group, they are passionate about what's best for the entire watershed, not their own specific area. And, I just think if say, I don't know, the town of Lake Cowichan or Cowichan Tribe said, we're not participating in the watershed board, and this body is going to have no authority to speak with regards to our areas of jurisdiction. It would be totally ineffective, and I worry that if we pursue a regional growth strategy that right from the get-go is excluding these big areas of our broader region, that it's going to be very ineffective, and it's going to really undermine these efforts we've been making towards greater regional collaboration. And again, I'll acknowledge that I think all of us at times are guilty of, myself included, really focusing on our own specific areas. But I think with a document like this and the structure that it creates, for example, the steering committee, it really forces us to work together and find ways that we can work towards a common good and a shared vision in terms of, land use planning being the one big area, but all kinds of other areas that are highlighted in the staff report, from economic development to transportation to environmental protection. So I really want to hear the perspectives of my colleagues and acknowledge the concerns raised by my colleagues here and directors in areas F and G. But at this stage of the process, as we're just starting it, I would hate to restrict it to or to exclude such a huge part of the region right from the get-go before we've had in those discussions or before we've even done any of the information gathering as Ms. Miles Wilson referenced. So I'm going to turn now to Director Acton.
Thank you. Right now I can feel like huge anxiety in my body all over. And I think this decision is very fearful, and that's why you have people jumping ship. And it's about collaboration, yet within this, and it's being mentioned that nothing's decided, it's about working together, but then we're gonna use Thumper's rules, where it's, the bully wins in the playground here. So we're gonna force people into it. And I don't feel, pardon me?
I'm sorry, point of order. It's not appropriate to call directors bullies around a table when we're having a discussion like this.
I'm not, okay, well,
I think, Director, if we can express different
Thumper's
viewpoints,
rules
but
is,
maybe
okay,
that
sorry, you're not
terminology.
they're not bullies, but all of us collectively have the power to force people into it. So however you want to define that, I was trying to define the term Thumper's rules. but it is. Anyway, so I'm having a really hard time with knowing that this is a good decision. There's a lot of fear here because, you know, we have the municipalities who have already decided that this is a good thing, and some electoral areas not sure, is this a good thing? You know, we already have very little autonomy and we're losing it. And that comment like really threw me off, and it really,
Director Acton, I don't want to cut you off, but can we focus it on just the amendment?
yeah,
like excluding the two
So,
areas?
I'm not sure this is the right decision, and I think I keep hearing that we're gonna have chances to iron it out, and then I keep hearing that this is a decision, it's done. We're doing a regional growth strategy, whether people come along or not. But you know what? I don't want to come along that way, and I want to throw Area B into that mix. We have the largest population, we have a lot to lose, and I don't feel comfortable with this decision. So, an amendment to the amendment to the amendment, throw Area B in there.
No, we can only have two amendments at once.
We can only have two amendments.
We can only have
at
two
once.
amendments on the floor at once. We can't have a third.
So Jesse, could you pull your amendment and we can just make another one and make it A, B, and, or A, G, and F?
Okay, so, I mean, I see Director Morrison and Director Martman in the queue here. Again, we've been discussing this for a long time now. Can we consider one of the amendments, or do we want to continue discussion?
If you take one off the floor, there'll be room for another.
So I'm gonna turn, I've got three directors here in the queue. Do you want to speak to the motion to exclude Area G, or are we ready to call the question on this one? Director Morrison, you're first in the queue, but are you ready to consider this now, or would you like to offer some additional input on it?
I would like to offer some additional input. This amendment is indicative of apprehension, and I'm going to be raising, as we go further, the desire to be part of, but I'm not feeling it. I think that my colleague isn't feeling it, that if we're going to do this as a collaborative, inclusive process, then we all have to feel enthusiastic about moving forward. And I'm not seeing divergent views being considered at this point. Even in the steering committee that's been struck, was there divergent views? We had the municipalities were represented and some of our staff, and it appears our staff are very enthusiastic about this process. I don't feel the consensus building that's required for this exercise to be successful. And I want to be part of that process, but I'm not feeling it. Thanks.
So I've got Director Martman and Director Staples, and I'm hoping we can call the question on excluding Area G, then hopefully move on to Area F shortly after that. Director Martman.
Thank you, Chair. One of the angst is that none of us at this table are driving this bus. This bus is driven by the province in that it sets the parameters and it sets how it must unfold. And so the angst from my electoral area perspective is really, and maybe this is part of the other directors, is that there's only one point in this process apparently that we can exclude. And I'm wondering if we've put ourselves into a corner by the wording of this resolution. And that maybe part of the thing is that we need to do more work prior to initiating with the province. And I think that initiation with the province is under number 3. And so can we support moving forward if we aren't initiating a regional growth strategy, but we're exploring the idea of getting information that will inform a regional growth strategy, and that the concept of excluding areas can be held at a later date when it would be more informed, they would have a better idea of what's going on, and give it some breathing room. Because I think there's a principle in this, in that everybody needs to have some degree of assurance or be able to take this back to their community and say, this works. And so I don't know the answer from a legislative perspective about when we have to do this, but perhaps it's in item 3 where we talk about initiating this with the province. So, and would the other areas want to be excluded if we aren't initiating, but we're just collecting data? So that's just the only thing I can add to this conversation.
Ms. Miles Wilson?
Just trying to help here. This is challenging. I get it, and I respect the gravity of this discussion. It does feel somewhat historic if you think about it, that we're here having this discussion today. So I just wanted to mention this because I made the point before about boundaries and how services cross boundaries, and it's not as easy just to stay out of Area G or to stay out of Area F or stay out of Area A. This is a regional growth strategy. And I think in just conferring with staff, if we're not there and you don't want to proceed with a regional growth strategy, then that would be what we would encourage you to think about. Because if we're putting forwards, advocating for a request to exclude certain areas, we are no longer doing a regional growth strategy. It becomes an impossible task. So I just wanted to put that in front of you all. It's either we're proceeding regionally in this very early stage or we're not doing it at all, and we completely respect your decision. We do have a lot of other things we can focus on as well, but we've kind of compiled all these decisions to get in front of you here today. And like I said, it would be I would label it as an impossible task to look at trying to stay within boundaries when we're investigating servicing and infrastructure and having those discussions.
So I've got Director Staples and, okay, I was hoping to cut it off after Director Staples. Director Stash, you have a comment as well? Then, okay, Director Kallio. All right, Director Staples.
Thank you. So I just a couple of things. One, no one wants anyone to feel bullied into this. The use of that language just indicates that that's what's happening right now, is that we're trying to bully people into this, and that's just not true. This has been a long process, and so my point of order was really to just address that. So I just wanted to start with that. And I also recognize how it can come across that way when I, think about how this is landing and what I'm hearing from other directors. And perhaps it's just a part of process that's missing. Because there seems to be concerns that I feel perhaps were not addressed in the best way that they could have been when some of the questions came up today. That the time from starting this to doing those workshops when we were together to this decision is so far between that it's, that we're not making a decision and having this discussion right after we kind of have all the information and all the questions answered. And so I'm not sure that the process supports the magnitude of the decision that we're making here. I also believe that a regional growth strategy is really important for the reasons that have been shared today. We have a changing, growing community. I don't even know that, no disrespect at all to any electoral areas, but our communities are growing outside of our boundaries. And it's important to protect, rural interests and rural spaces in our community. But it's also important to ensure that we're collaborating and ensuring that infrastructure needs are being met, and that we're, looking at whether it's water, whether it's the river, whether it's the multitude of things that we need to do together. And so I feel very torn because I'm not here to disrespect any of you. And at the same time, I'm here to look at this as this area as a region that we're all part of. And I don't know how, at this point in time, given the constraints that we're under with this discussion, how to make a decision that doesn't do one of those things, which to me, You know, I again want to respect you, but I also need to respect the needs of the community for now and for the future. And that means we have to figure out a way to work together. So I am not comfortable with throwing this out because of that either. So is there another point as to Director Martman's, you know, where, and I don't want to prolong this again. You know, discussion has been going on long since this board of directors has been sitting around the table. So I feel tied up because what happens if we, you know, pause this to do another discussion jointly to learn more information and we're still at this crossroads where not everyone is on board. And I've sat at many tables and not everyone is always on board. But this is our region we're talking about. And it's about how everything connects and what we need to do to plan for its future. And so that's how I'm feeling right now. I'm not saying I have a solution. There could be a number of them. But, you know, just, and again, how long do we prolong this discussion? So, not that that's helpful to right now, but I wanted to just state what's going on for me at this moment. And hopefully we can explore something that will get us to a more collaborative, if not, everybody being in favor, at least not feeling like it is right now around this board.
So I'm going to turn next to Director Staff, so on excluding Area G.
Thank you, Chair. I'm trying to think of, how the two directors are getting to where they're at of not being included, but at the same time, my understanding of how much I value their concerns for the residents. So my question on with their requesting exclusion and then the reason for them doing that would be, I guess, is just a question to staff, is Director McClinton held that brand new document. They've worked super hard on it. When I look at an RGS, am I wrong in thinking that the RGS is actually going to enshrine your brand new OCP and give you a larger platform so that the rest of...
Point of order.
No, I won't direct it at you then.
Okay, Director
It's not
McClellan.
brand new. It's not adopted. It's at first reading.
Okay, so that's where I'm going with my
All right,
questioning,
continue.
Chair, and thank you for bringing up that clarity. So with these the question is like, whether that's in or other areas, does an RGS, my belief and why I want to see everybody support it is, does it not allow other regions to better understand the other electoral areas and that their positions and their beliefs for their area's growth has a louder voice? I understand we have electoral areas and we all sit as a board and that's the voice, but now there's a document that really lifts up Director Morrison's area, Director McClinton's areas and said, this is what this area believes in and this is how it fits into the greater puzzle. So my question is, am I wrong in thinking that the RGS actually gives a greater voice to each municipality and electoral area and isn't about excluding them or not listening? So my question to staff, does an RGS lift up and enshrine OCPs and local area plans to even stronger, more regional level?
Ms. Miles Wilson, Ms. Kurjeff, when you want to take that one?
Thank you, Chair. If the will of the board is that happen, that's what the RGS would do, yes.
Director Callio.
Don't touch it. Thank you, Chair. I'm hearing what the directors are saying for their areas, and, you know, I don't understand what good a regional growth strategy is if not everybody's participating in it. It's not a regional growth strategy, and especially if you got the largest population area in the CVRD, Area B opting out of the regional growth strategy. So it looks like it's in jeopardy right now being implemented. I just have a couple questions, and they're pretty simple. And one is, what would be the benefit of being part of the RGS? And there's obviously a benefit for being part of the RGS. And what good is the RGS if F and G remove themselves and also Area B, which is the largest area in the CVRD?
Are those rhetorical?
No, I'm asking a question.
All right. Ms. Kurjeff, do you want to jump in on that one?
Through you, Chair, I think probably the biggest benefit of the RGS would be to provide guidance on critical decisions around settlement patterns, of course, but the second being infrastructure and infrastructure investment.
So that gives these areas that are trying to opt out, that would give them the ability to help make decisions in other areas of the CVRD, am I correct?
Yes.
Yes. So another question I have, while you're standing up at the podium, is if they remove themselves from the RGS and the RGS is passed, does that give them the ability to still make decisions on land decisions, say, in South Cowichan, or when they're voting on decisions for areas B or C, or C? Or would they have to opt, or by opting out, does that remove them from making decisions on land decisions in those areas? Because right now, my understanding is that we all vote at this table when something comes before it for a land decision, and we all vote on that particular item.
Thank you, Chair, through you to Director Kallio. So whether or not there's a RGS in place, if questions are being considered by the board around electoral area or municipal OCPs or zoning, those are decided on by the appropriate local government, which in the case of the CVRD would include the electoral areas. So a rezoning application in the South Cowichan would be voted on by all electoral area directors. The question arises, and this would require, I think, some in consultation with legal counsel, is in the case of a regional growth strategy, if those areas were not participating in the regional growth strategy, would they have an opportunity to participate in a vote on a regional growth strategy amendment? I can't answer that for you right now. I don't believe so, but I would need to clarify.
You don't
that.
believe they would have a vote on those items?
I don't believe
Because
so.
I'm thinking of the liability that puts the CVRD at, because if, for example, the development doesn't pass because the non-participating areas vote against that particular thing and it sways it towards a negative, that particular developer could probably, in my opinion, take us to task and maybe take us to court. Is that a possibility?
Well, through the chair, that's a legal question. I can't answer that.
Just got it on the floor.
Director McClinton, then Director Justice, then I want to call the question.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. And thanks for giving this discussion time to breathe. I just, especially since we're debating the amendment for Area G, I just can't state enough how much the folks in Area G do not want to be part of the regional growth strategy. We're happy and excited to work with the other people around this table, but to go from a meeting for information in November to now, we're in or we're out, feels, I don't know, the word that comes to mind is disingenuous at best. And I just so incredibly uneasy about moving forward. I also disagree with our CAO's assessment that you guys can't move forward without the two areas. I mean, the biggest decisions in the region are between North Cowichan and Duncan. I mean, work through the issues that you guys want to work through. But I mean, make no mistake, this removes the ability for electoral areas to have even the limited autonomy they do have. And there's, every time I've talked to somebody about this, the benefit, they tell me what the benefit is. I see that along with the constituents in Area G, view that as a liability. It's not a benefit. And I just hope that if you could put yourself in my space, would I be supporting you? And I just really hope that you'll appreciate the amendment and have Area G excluded. Thank you.
Director Justice.
Thank you. I do take the words of the CAO very seriously on this, and reflecting Director Staples and Director Callio's questions and comments. I mean, I think we need to recognize that excluding these areas, this vote, is more than just an amendment. This is actually the question. And so I would like to take the opportunity, if the question is going to get called, to have my say about whether or not we should be going down this road. And so I've struggled a little bit with finding the right words for this, and I guess it's because I think this decision is so important to our collective future. And I believe that moving down the RGS road is the right decision for us at this moment, especially given the growth pressures that the entire region is facing. And I would add, now that we have a clearer and clearer understanding of how growth policy and growth decisions have led us to be in the situation that we're in and will affect our future environmental and economic well-being. So thinking regionally, thinking strategically, and I would add thinking from a watershed perspective is really essential at this juncture of our time. And just to go back to the growth thing, I mean, many of you have already indicated that you've been following the situation of North Cowichan. We're being overwhelmed with development applications and have basically more than twice the development applications that we have the ability to service. We have applications for decades of growth coming all at once that we can't deal with. And I don't think that's just North Cowichan. I think that's growth pressure from the north, from the south. I recognize that an RGS is a bit of a leap of faith, and it can be a little frightening. There is some potential for loss of independence, but we have control over that as a board. We can't fully predict what will come to any particular area. And I think the other point is this is a long-term project, and we don't really, this is probably something that's going to have an effect well beyond our sort of political lifetimes, let's say. Having said that, I want to speak a little bit about what I find exciting about a regional growth strategy, and that is the potential it has in helping us achieve some of those long-term sustainability goals that we all know are critical in the long term, right? So issues like ensuring watershed and aquifer health, protecting biodiversity, supporting ecosystem regeneration, supporting food security, mitigating and adapting to climate change. All of those things are sort of deeply embedded in a regional approach to growth and growth management. And I would also add that, and it's fundamental actually, having infrastructure and services that are affordable in the long term and therefore are economically suitable for all of our residents is a part of that. So it's really important that we start from in the experience of North Cowichan and given the costs that are accruing, it's really important that we do consider servicing capacity, both constraints and opportunities, but I think the real value in the creation of an RGS goes far beyond those considerations, and that the opportunity really lies in recognizing that as a local government, land use planning and growth policy are our most important levers to pull to achieve all of those sustainability goals that we want. We have to do it regionally or it won't happen. So I say, whatever we do with these amendments, let's get on with starting a regional growth strategy. Thanks.
All right. I'm now going to call the question on the second amendment. So this is the amendment to exclude Area G from the regional growth exercise. going to call the question. All in favor of excluding Area G? And opposed? Failed, okay. On the Area F, so to exclude Area F from the regional growth strategy exercise, all in favor of excluding Area F? And opposed? It's failed, all right. So we're going to go back to the original motion as amended. So that's the recommendation. So we recommend the board on April 23rd that the Cowichan Valley Regional District initiate the preparation of a regional growth strategy applicable to all lands within the jurisdictional boundaries of the Cowichan Valley Regional District. So I'll call the question, then all in favor?
No more comments?
We can, but yeah, do we want further discussion? Yeah, so motion to refer to.
We already have our. I'd like to refer this to the APCs, as we already have our official community plan out for APCs, and this can easily be added on for comment about, there's been zero public engagement regarding this issue with any of the electoral areas.
Motion to refer this to the Electoral Area Advisory Planning Commissions. I just would note, and I'm not trying to debate here, Director McClinton, but the staff recommendation is if we do initiate this, they will come back to us with an engagement strategy for the committee to review at a future date. But the motion has been, the referral has been moved. Is there a seconder? Seconded by Director Acton. I'm going to turn to Director Acton next to speak on the referral motion.
Thank you. I would support this in the fact that unfortunately, some of the comments that have already been made have actually caused my apprehension to rise some more. So the idea that that we need it for collaboration on services and environmental protection, like we're doing all of these things already. So to have that consult from our APCs is actually really valuable as an electoral area, because I'm the only one sitting here making a decision based on, yes, maybe we're going to lose some autonomy, but it will be up to this board, which actually also scares me too, because the previous boards had, we've lost their viewpoints, and so moving forward, depending on our subsequent boards or future boards is going to also cause me a little bit more anxiety here about this decision. So I totally support that decision. It's always great to have more community input as area directors to make these big decisions. And I don't actually see any of the highlights not happening currently through the CVRD. So thank you.
Okay, I'm going to turn to Director Wilson. Just wait a second. Okay, we're just checking procedurally if it can be referred at this time. But I'm going to turn to Director. Okay, we'll just wait a moment. No, don't leave your seats, except for Tim. It's taking a bit long. All right, I'm now going to resume our committee of the whole meeting. Where we left off was there was a referral to refer the initiation of the regional growth strategy to the electoral area advisory planning commissions. However, staff have looked into the propriety of this and have a ruling. The corporate officer.
Thank you, Chair. So under the Advisory Planning Commission, the board establishes the Planning Commission respecting all matters to land use, community planning, proposed bylaws and permits under Division 4 to 14, part of this section. Regional growth strategy falls under Part 15 and therefore out of the scope and ruled out of order. Thank you.
Okay, so we're back to the, ruled out of order. So we're back to the motion on the floor then to recommend the initiation of the RGS for discussion at the April 23rd board meeting. We've got 4 items before us right now, so we can either try to breeze through these, or what I'm going to suggest to the committee is that we postpone discussion of items 1 to 4 under R3 to the next committee of the whole meeting on April 23rd. So that's moved by Director Segal, seconded by Director Staples. So on the motion to postpone. Okay, it is debatable. Director Acton.
Can we, it's debate, the motion to refer it is, what's?
Yeah, just to.
Yeah, so I would just like to add our amendment for next board meeting for discussion.
Sorry, the amendment from this morning?
Yeah. No, that I sent to you.
Yeah, of course, yeah. And there's 2 of them. I mean, I'll turn to the corporate officer.
Can't we add them to the next board meeting for discussion? It allows the public to see them for 2 weeks and for the directors to digest it. And
Yeah,
my amendment is from staff.
I'll turn to the corporate officer. My thinking would be circulated among the board for our consideration rather than amending the staff recommendation to include it and then postponing consideration of that. I think that's going to get a bit too convoluted. Ms. Boyd?
Thank you, Chair. May I suggest that we're going to postpone this motion to the next committee of whole, 1 through 4, and then during the next time of 2 weeks, these motions be circulated amongst yourselves. No discussion or decisions would be made by email. This is for information when we come back for discussion at the next April 23rd meeting, if I may.
Follow-up?
So follow-up is, can it be on the agenda somehow so that the public can also see that amendment? Since we're going to be doing it at a board meeting, a decision made, et cetera, this doesn't seem, and of course.
I think the challenge for me is that even if staff have provided advice on wording, if a director has a motion they want to include, that would typically be through if you want it on the agenda, it would be through the notice of motion process. Otherwise, it's.
Okay, so can we add it to notice of motion today? How do we get it printed on the agenda so that the public can see it?
So
you're saying notice of motion, can I do that today?
A process of notice of motion, you would be giving the motion today. It would actually miss this board meeting this afternoon. It would then go up to board next time for consideration, and so it would miss the deadline of actually discussion at the next committee of the whole meeting. That's it.
Is more than 2 weeks away, the deadline? Okay.
I guess what I'd say to the committee is, and I recognize, Director Acton, you did circulate that amendment in writing this morning, and Director Nicholson and Alternate Director Lochner did have another motion that was circulated in advance of this meeting, but in the next 2 weeks, there may be other ideas that we have. You know, we had a couple motions on the fly today, and as we have a couple weeks to think about this, we may have other ideas as well. Obviously, it's ideal that we include this in the published agenda on the Friday so that the public can see it, but not always possible because of our process that we have established here.
And then whatever's decided is going to be ratified at the board in 2 weeks?
No, that'll be.
We negated the motion that went.
Yeah, that'll be up to the committee of the whole at the next meeting if we pass this motion. The recommendation will be debated at the committee of the whole meeting. They can either refer it to the board that day or wait another 2 weeks or even longer than that. It's going to be up to us in 2 weeks to decide what meeting we refer these recommendations to, assuming we pass this postponed motion right now. Does everyone understand that? Okay.
So can I,
Yeah.
can vote against it being referred? Because we just have commission reports here. I don't think we have a lot left on our agenda. So personally would like to finish this because I heard comments like, we keep talking about the same thing, so let's just get it done today.
Yeah, Ms. Boyd.
Thank you, Chair. If we pass the motion to postpone to the next committee whole meeting, another motion could be made to include additional recommendations in the package circulated to committee whole. Does that work? Or Chair, you can make the ruling. Is that operational?
Yeah, I'm happy to spend like another 2.5 hours debating this. I'm looking at the clock right there, and we've got a meeting at 1:30. So like this has been a lengthy discussion. We could defeat this postponement motion and just kind of wrap everything up in 5 minutes. I'm just, based on what I've heard so far this morning, I'm not confident that that's going to happen. So we've got a postponement motion. It's been moved. It's on the floor. Do we want to debate that further, or do we want to call the question? Yep, Director Wilson, and then Director Morrison.
I don't want to throw a hissy fit here, but every time it comes to my turn to ask a question or be heard, we have a break or we have a referral. And all of a sudden, my light goes off. I still have questions here, and I would like to be able to ask them for my own clarity. Can I ask a question, please?
Of course, Director Wilson. And I know I've said we want to call the question on this because of the clock there, but I will acknowledge Director Wilson has been patient, and there's been some issues with his place in the queue here. So continue.
Thank you. As far as the APC thing is concerned, I have a very good chairperson at my APC. I will be sending her an email saying, you need to watch this regional discussion right now before Tuesday, because we have the meeting on the bylaw on the MOCP and OCP on Tuesday, and I want my APC to be informed about what's going on here. Hopefully they will have time to read that, to watch this. Now, the second thing is, can I ask a question? If there is a regional growth strategy, there will be votes at that regional growth strategy. Is that correct? Is it a weighted vote, or is it a one-on-one vote? I need to have clarity on that as well before I can make any other decisions there.
Yeah, staff can jump in and correct me if I'm wrong, but my understanding it is one director, one vote. And I am allowing some flexibility here because we really should be debating the postponement motion.
If I'd had a chance to
I
answer
do
these
recognize
questions
you were
before,
waiting.
then I would have done.
Yeah, I understand. You've been waiting patiently. So can we call the question on the postponement, or Director Martman?
Don't touch it.
Thank you. I think what I wanted to add in here is what is the best process to have a conversation that will help directors either solidify the position or change the position. And I'm not sure what the postponement is going to achieve that, and I don't know if the directors want to speak to this, but one of the things I think happened or did not happen, and I think Director Morrison mentioned it at the very beginning, is that we have this void of information. We had an information item November 20th at EASC, and this has now come up, and I think there's a very fulsome conversation that should happen at EASC. So that would not happen with this motion. And so how do we get this to go back? If this is something that we need to, really, the EASC directors need to work through this.
Yeah, I guess my counter to that would be you had the opportunity in November when, after the board referred it to the EASC, that was the opportunity to have that fulsome debate.
Right.
I have to say, it's getting a bit frustrating that we refer these motions to different bodies, and then it comes back here and we have the same debate all over again. So if we want, we can keep debating this till 1:29 and then move straight into board, but I'm just saying let's postpone it for now because it feels like we are talking in circles right now. And if we come back fresh in a couple weeks, maybe we're going to be in a better position to kind of find a path forward together.
Yeah, I totally, but I would say of 2 ESC meetings I missed last year, that was one of them. And so, you know, I own that. I wasn't available. And so what I'm looking for is building the space, not about, you know, what is the best building of space. Postponing is one way of building space. Referral to ESC would be another way of building space. And I think building, you know, that's all I'm speaking to is a process. Thank you.
Director McClinton.
I was in the same vein, and I mean, there was no referral. We received for information, so there was no ability to put forward a motion at electoral area service at the last.
No, Director McClinton, I got to correct you on that. If you receive something for information, you can pull it and debate it. So we get correspondence all the time for information. We have the ability as directors here to pull that and provide direction from staff. So perhaps it could have been framed better in the way it was brought forward to AESC. But if something is there for information, you do have the opportunity to debate it along with the rest of the committee.
I would appreciate it if it was if EA electoral area service had another chance to discuss this.
All right, well, I think we're in a position now where we're not going to resolve these motions in the next half an hour. Perhaps I'm wrong, and we want to defeat this postponement motion, but my suggestion is we now call the question and postpone this discussion to April 23rd when we've had a chance to reflect and can come in fresh and hopefully, if not reach a consensus, something close to would be ideal. Director Martman.
Please, thank you, Chair. Does a motion to refer supersede a motion to postpone? So I'd like to refer this to the next ESC meeting, or to a following ESC.
Okay, it's been seconded. Any discussion? I guess my comment on that would be, I recognize we've all got different perspectives, and I don't want to challenge anyone's motives with regards to this, but my sense is that some folks have made up their mind that they don't support this, and this is less about getting more information and more about stalling this whole exercise. And I don't think that's our role as directors. I think if we support this, then we move ahead with it. If we don't, then we, yeah.
Chair, I just want to challenge that anybody ulterior motives about this.
Yeah,
I think
I'm saying I'm trying not to say that.
Yeah. Well, and not saying it, you said it. So, and I have all due respect to you, Chair, and I have all due respect to all other directors. That in a place of incongruity between concepts and thoughts and philosophies, that there is space to work through those. That's one of my beliefs. And I guess I'm just speaking that referral isn't a bad thing. I don't think postponement's a bad thing. It's just a nuance of what it allows. Thank you.
No, thanks for that, Director Martman. And I guess from my perspective, if some of us have made up our mind and we don't want to pursue this, and if it is less about getting more information, then it would make more sense to kind of put this thing to bed and let staff focus on other priorities. That's what I was trying to say, but if it is really a desire for more information, then yeah, appreciate hearing your perspective on that. So I'll call the question then on referring this to the Director of Justice.
Can I just get some clarity? Are we now voting on a referral to the EASC?
Yeah.
And are we talking about the next EASC, like next week, or are we talking about some distant time in the future? What? With clarity on timing?
So I'm going to turn to the corporate officer.
Depending on timing, of course. This is a motion to refer 1 through 4 to the next I had heard ESC meeting. It was moved and seconded. Therefore, this motion would go to the next board meeting and then the next ESC meeting. However, it could say that it recommended the board today and a report up to board today to get that referral for next ESC meeting, depending on your timing, and that's the committee's choosing.
Thank you. I could support this if it was going immediately to the EASC and then would still be available for debate at the next committee of the whole meeting.
Thank you. So then that would be that this motion be referred to the board of April today. I scribbled it out. 1 through 4 to EASC meeting, and then the referral would go to EASC for the following week.
Okay, could we get an amendment to provide that clarity? Director Staples, then Director Martman.
I just wanted clarity that I'm supportive of it going to EASC for discussion, but then to make sure that it is coming back to the next board meeting. That's the piece that I'm not certain is captured, so I just want to make sure that that is captured somewhere in all of this.
Yep. Ms. Boyd, you want to read it out one more time?
Thank you, Chair. So this motion would, if the committee's choosing, go today straight up to board to be ratified, that the motion be referred to the next EASC meeting, which is the following week. At that EASC meeting, then that motion, whatever comes out of that EASC meeting, it would have to go back, and then it would go to board, whatever comes out of EASC. I can't predict that at this time.
Okay, so that's a amendment to the referral. Would you like to move it, Director Martman?
I'm comfortable with that. I think the piece would be, does this give staff adequate time? I wouldn't want to, presume I know anything that staff has to do to make this work, and so I wouldn't want something to be proposed that they go like, how can we do this? So I guess I would put it to the discretion of staff that if they can comply with it. If not, it would follow the following ESC meeting. So.
Yeah, my understanding is staff will make that assessment. If they're prepared, you'll get it at the next meeting, and if not, you'll probably have a good rationale for why not. Ms. Miles-Wilson?
It's the same material, so it's there's no additional material to be prepared. So it's at the discretion of this committee. Yeah, we'll be prepared when you'd like us to come back.
So would you like to move the amendment to the referral? Yeah. Or amendment to the referral motion. So it's been moved, the amendment, seconded by Director Segal. Can I call the question? All in favor? And opposed? Unopposed, motion carries. So now the referral motion as amended. I'll call the question. All in favor? And opposed? Unopposed, motion carries. So now we'll go back to the motion to postpone items 1.41 to 4 under R3 to the next. Okay. And that. All right. So yeah. So I think we can move on now from R3. Yes. Yeah, we'll move on to question period. So I don't see any members of the public in the gallery, and we don't have a closed session. So I'll look for a motion to adjourn. Moved by Director Morrison, second by Director Callaghan.